2 weeks off.
Right.
24th. 27th already. Time is flying. 27th already. Oh, of June. Time is flying.
Michelle must have had to go take care of something.
Legislation we received earlier from the law.
Good mayor. Good over there at Kennedy. A lot of walks. A lot of walks.
Got this afternoon.
As soon as I get the meeting to order, I'll get you one.
Take your time. Thank you.
We're ready.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 27th, 2017 regular caucus meeting for the City of Brook Park. I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Scott?
Here.
Bergio?
Here.
Salvatore?
Here.
Troyer?
Here.
Powers?
Here.
McDonald? Here. Mancini?
Here.
Would everyone please stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to item 3, which is approval of minutes of the preceding meetings. Item number 1 under there is the regular caucus meeting that was held on May 23rd, 2017.
Motion to approve the May 23rd minutes. Meeting.
Support.
Minutes.
There's been a motion to approve. Council's or support?
Support.
Rich Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Sorry. Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Mancini?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Bergio?
Yes.
Salvatore?
Yes.
Troyer?
Yes.
Powers?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Okay, the meeting minutes for the May 23rd caucus have been approved. Item number 2 is the regular caucus meeting that was held on June 13th, 2017.
Again, motion to approve those minutes from June 13th.
Support.
There's been a motion to approve, properly supported. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll on adoption.
Mancini?
Yes.
Troyer?
Yes.
Powers?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Bergio?
Abstain.
Salvatore?
Yes.
Okay, the meeting minutes for the June 13th, 2017 caucus have been adopted. That completes the items under number 3. We'll move to item number 4, which is discussion. The first item there is the 2014-2015 Rules of Council that requested by Councilman Salvatore to be placed on the agenda. And I placed them on the agenda. So, Councilman Salvatore, if you could at least start us off with this discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, I've tried to change a few of the rules, and a couple of them got amended, but most of them that I was considering were rejected. So what I'm proposing here this evening is that we consider taking the rules from 2014 and 2015, placing them on the next council agenda under verbal approval and adopting those rules and making a couple of minor amendments this evening to those minutes prior to passing or taking a roll call to send this to the council floor for possible adoption. Obviously, the one change would have to be the years from 2014, 2015 to 2016, 2017. And another proposed amendment I would make to what you have in front of you is the one rule that was changed on page 10 under Rule 11 to add the words after number 2 in Rule 11 requires a vote of majority of council. I'd like to.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one? I missed that.
Yeah,
If you go to page 10 of the old rules.
Page 10 of the 2014 rules?
Yes. And you look under Rule 11 and under the second item for adjournment. I would just want to add requires a vote of majority of council, as that appears in it was an amendment that was made to the new rules adopted in 2016, 2017. Other than that, everything else would remain the same. So that's my proposal. It's open for discussion.
Any discussion, Councilman Mancini?
Thanks. So, if you could go over again, Councilman Salvatore, your changes that you wanted again, because I couldn't hear when he had said. Could you go over them one more time?
From the beginning?
Well,
Okay, I'm proposing.
just on the proposed changes.
On the proposed changes, okay, if you go to page 10, under Rule 11, under the adjournment section, which is number 2, in that line, we'll just add the word requires a vote of majority of council, and just for explanation for that particular rule change, that gave council the authority to adjourn the meeting by a vote of council, as we do right now. But it was not in the old set of rules. So I'm just proposing that we keep that and just add it to the old set of rules if they should become adopted at the council meeting, that rule of adjournment, we maintain that part of Rule 11.
Okay. Well, we kind of been doing that more or less here, right?
Yes.
For a little bit, but that will definitely decide. That'll be the punctuation mark that it's going to be a roll call of a majority of council.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Question I would have as a chair is deals with on page 16 is under rule number 24. The council has actually in effect, and it's the same rule that was in effect on the other ones, is the ability or the process that we follow for amending the rules. And it says that these rules may be amended or new rules adopted by a majority vote of all members elected to council. Any such alteration or amendment shall be submitted in writing at the preceding regular meeting and shall be placed on the agenda under the order of J, other communications and petitions. And that this requirement shall be waived only by a unanimous consent with a recorded vote of all members. So as far as for tonight's purposes, I was told that you contacted the clerk and you asked that the 2014-2015 rules of council be placed on the agenda for discussion. Since I've been rather open with allowing council members to place items on the agenda. This is not a document that actually is in existence, but if you're looking to amend rules, it seems like what you're proposing tonight is actually against our rules.
Mr. Chairman, that is so far from the truth. It borderlines ridiculous. I'm proposing that we go back to the old set of rules, which I have tried to do before. It's on the agenda for discussion, and I certainly understand how the rules are before, and I know how they are now. I'm proposing that we do this, and this is going to be, the whole packet will be an attempt to make a rule change. This will be an entire rule change, everything. It may not go to the council floor at the next meeting. I'm asking council to discuss it. Open, honest discussion on these rules.
I understand what you're saying, and I guess the confusion I have, or the that what I'm looking for, Mr. Salvatore, is our rules say that any such alteration or amendment shall be submitted in writing. I have no document. Did you submit any written document to the clerk for us to deal with? You're coming to this meeting tonight and making a verbal presentation looking to amend the rules when our own process for making alterations or amendment is you shall submit in writing your proposal. That would afford everyone that sits up here on council and also everyone that's in the audience or on the postings the ability to read your proposal prior to the meeting and come here prepared to discuss it. You want to just say, let's discuss it, let's put it on next meeting's agenda, which is contrary to the rule.
So far, the only one talking is you. No one else has said a word. All I'm proposing, and unless somebody has a different...
Mr. Salvatore, what I'm asking for is, did you...
Well, I'm about to tell you if you just be quiet for a minute.
Did you submit anything in writing to...
Yes, it's in writing. Unless everybody else gets a different packet than I do, the rules are right in there. Everybody has a set of the old rules. Now, they're in my agenda. I don't know if they're in yours, but they're in mine. All I'm asking council is to consider this, and the proper motions will be made at the time if the council of the city of Brook Park decides to adopt these rules and consider them. Then I will make a motion to place on the next caucus agenda exactly the way the rule requires under a rule change. This is for discussion. Mine says discussion. Item number 1, rules of council.
I can
It's
read
quite
that.
clear what we're trying to do here.
I can't read your proposed change because I don't see a proposal.
Well, if you have the same thing I have, it's the whole set of rules. The entire set of rules with 2 minor adjustments, which I tried to explain. Asked you the question from Councilman Mancini. That's all I'm proposing here is for consideration. I'm not asking anybody to do anything unethical, immoral, or illegal. I'm asking them to consider looking at the rules, how we used to do council business, and to look at them, and if their votes are there, I'm in favor of doing it. I'll make the motions at the proper time. If we're not, then just tell me forget about it, and I'll take it back. We'll take it off the agenda, and we'll move to item 2. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Council, any other discussion? Councilwoman Powers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tend to disagree with Mr. Councilman Salvatore because this sets a precedent. If you bend the rules for this to say, well, it's already written there, and you don't really give enough information about the change, so the next time something comes up, you can say, well, we did it for this, so now let's do it for the next proposal. So I think that we should follow the rules as they're written. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilwoman McDonald?
All right, I need some help to clarify. So basically, if we're looking at Rule 24, for something to be properly in writing, an email would suffice stating, like, I guess I need more information about what, is it a formal request? Would it be an email? Like, what would documentation look like? Something specifically saying?
All that's, I mean, the way I look at it, Councilwoman, is the only thing that's on the agenda now, it lists, we were requested to list 2014, 2015 rules of council.
Okay.
There's nothing in that we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss a document that actually is a historical document. It's not it's not an active document. It's open for discussion. There's there's nothing to indicate that we were looking to amend anything there or make any changes to that. There was nothing in writing, as our rules say. If you're looking
so
to
I guess what I'm for clarification for future is, what does writing look like? Would an email suffice?
If it's in writing, yes, an email would suffice of what you're proposing. What if you're proposing to make a change to the 2016, 2017 rules that are in effect, you need to make a written submission, whether it be a written submission that you hand hard copy to the clerk for her distribution, or you email it to the clerk and all members of council.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Mancini?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, if I could ask, in one sense of form, I was always tend to believe that what caucus was for was a rough-up period, you know, coming for council. And I'd be more than a little honest with you. First, I'd like to know this requirement shall be waived only by unanimous consent with the recorded vote of all members. I kind of like to get a definition on that, because I think that could change a few things here. But But I was always led to believe that this is what caucus was about, bringing it out, whether it be written form, whether it be a verbal form. It is on the agenda, so in that aspect, it says 2014, 2015 Rules of Council, Councilman Salvatore. I wasn't exactly sure it was coming. My ears were open to hear. Honestly, I thought it probably going to be a little more than that. I didn't know, but I always kind of thought this is what caucus was for. This is what we come with our sleeves rolled up and to work on things for. So, I mean, I have no problem either way. I don't care what you guys want to do. I'll discuss anything at any given time as long as it's here. At least I have over the weekend to take a look, see, and do review and do some research. So, I'm ready for a discussion on anything. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Scott?
Yes, thank you. How is this any different than any other discussions that we've had? We're just bringing it up for discussion. We're talking about it. We're going to work on it. If there's changes to be made, then we talk about it. I don't know if this is any different than any other discussions that we've had. We're not making any changes. What are we doing to it? We're just discussing it. We're not putting it up for a vote or anything. We're just talking about it. We're working on it. I don't understand how this discussion is different than any other discussion that we've had in the past. Maybe you could enlighten me on that, if you don't mind. How this is different than any other discussions that we've had. When we've put just a piece on there for discussion. I could pull up your past caucus, and I'll bet you there's, on the last one, that there's for discussion. And we discussed it. I don't know what the difference is.
I would say that the difference, the way I see it, Councilman Scott, is it's posted on our agenda. It was posted on Friday.
Correct.
We had all weekend to look at it.
Correct.
And we come here to the meeting.
Correct.
And Councilman Salvatore, from what I'm gathering, is he's offering to alter our rules in a manner of saying he wants to have the 2014-2015 rules substituted for the 2016-2017 rules with a couple of modifications. Now, our rules that are currently in effect say if he wants to do that, we're supposed to be provided with a written explanation so that we have the ability to come to the meeting prepared to do that.
We have it. I mean, this is just discussion. We got this on Friday. I mean, I don't understand what the difference is.
When I got this on Friday, when the clerk told me that he wanted it on for discussion, I had no idea what it was for. I had no idea that he was looking to substitute these for the old rule, for the current rules. There was no explanation for it. Did
anybody ask him?
We are discussing this.
Councilman, can you please refrain from speaking out of order?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'll be good.
Let's hope so.
We've gotten these discussions on Friday, and we don't know anything about them either. I mean, this isn't something new. That's all I got to say. Thanks. I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Troyer. Law
Thank you.
Director, I see your hand. I'll get
Thank you,
when
Mr.
you're done.
Council
Okay.
President. Sadly, Councilman from Ward 4 is right. Too often we do get these things last minute. Now, in this circumstance, a little different, but too often we get things last minute, and we're asked to discuss something that we have had no time to think about. And so, yes, sadly, that does happen way too often up here. But I think the point is that having the 2014-2015 rules, which are obsolete, just posted as discussion on them, which was odd because why are we going to talk about rules that aren't in place and are obsolete? What I think what would have been nice was to have had a line or something saying, you know, discussion of the rules to change back with one modification, something like some idea of what we're going to be discussing, not just here's a document we're going to discuss in it, but what part of this document are we going to be discussing? What were the changes going to be? Now, and it would have been easy because it's basically change it back, which again, getting to that part of it is changing back what we did a year and a half ago that has worked for us for a year and a half, for the most part, and then now going back on improving things on council, I have an issue with that. But at this time, what I'd like to do is have, if Councilman Salvatore would do this, go over the changes. Go over the, let's go over the page by page and what you're changing back. I do have a copy. I think we all got a copy of the current rules. So maybe if we do that, we could actually, if you go over that, we might be able to start having a conversation on what the actual changes are, because I don't remember exactly what all the changes were from a year and a half ago. So that may be getting more in line what we should be doing. But the fact of the matter is, this information should be given to us, and if we get information on a packet or any kind of legislation, whatever, it should be explained why we're getting it. Rule changes. What rule changes? I mean, there's a lot of rules here. So I would just ask that Mr. Salvatore maybe go over those changes one by one through it, and then maybe we can be in a better place. Thank you.
The law director had her hand up. I would, if you asking me to answer that question, is that what you want me to do? If you wanted to, does he want an answer to that?
Let's get the law director's inputs, and then we'll, I think what he wants is for you to go through what your proposed changes are. So, Ms. Director, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would note that Rule 24 is entitled to amend rules. It's not talking about discussing rules. It's talking about what you need to do when you actually go to amend or institute a new rule. In this particular case, I think you're discussing replacing the current rules with the old rules or some of the rules. And I really don't see how a rule talking about amending a rule would necessarily apply to that. I think it's properly on the agenda for today. You got 16 pages of rules. When I first looked at it, you're right, it is a historical document, but my first thought was that this is a discussion of taking these rules en banc and taking the 2014 rules and replacing the current rules with these rules. So I'm noting that we're merely discussing it. We're not amending it at this time, and therefore I don't think that Rule 24 is applicable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The only thing, maybe I misunderstood part of Mr. Salvatore's opening statement. I thought he was suggesting that this would go to an agenda for a verbal approval for council to take an action. So I viewed it that it was going beyond the scope of just discussion about what he would like to do. It was actually, there was going to be an action taken to start the process for amending the rules. So that's, unless I misunderstood you, your statement was to place it on an agenda, which to do that we'd have to have it written. So I understand what you said, Ms. Director. I appreciate your input. And Mr. Salvatore, if you'd like to accommodate the councilman that's asked you to go through and say, besides the 2014, 2015 rules, if you could identify what's different in your proposal, that would be helpful.
First of all, let me answer your statement. I wasn't asking for action tonight because I'm certainly aware that no action could be taken tonight other than discussion and the proper preparation and move it to a caucus agenda under a new set of rules proposed to be transferred then to a council meeting for adoption. That's the answer to your question. Your question?
Clarification. So your opening statement was to just move it to another caucus meeting, was that?
I was going to follow the process exactly how the rule
That's what I'm asking, Mr. Salvatore.
And at the end result would have, but I was taking everybody to the end result of what would have to take place in order to accomplish what I'm trying to do.
So we would have discussion tonight, and the discussion would then lead to maybe moving it to another caucus meeting to start that process?
That may be moving it to another caucus. If the votes are here, absolutely, positively moving it to another caucus.
Okay, thank you.
Under the
that's
proper
different
procedure.
than what I understood you saying. So that.
And the answer to Mr. Troyer's question, you have a document that states the 2017 rules. I'm proposing that we put the 2015 rules back in place. And you have all the time in the world to read it. I don't think I have to go line by line and hold your hand and show you what we used to do as opposed to what we're doing now. And I will not do that. You're a big boy now. Take both of them, go home, read them. If you don't like them, come back and say no. Thank you.
I somewhat understand what you're saying, Councilman, but I also think if you're proposing to make changes and council people are asking you to explain what those changes are,
I think does every piece of legislation that comes before City Council, we have to take a kindergarten approach and go over every line and discuss it? This is pretty simple.
Point of order.
This is pretty simple stuff. I'm not out of order. You're out of order. And so are you. I'm asking you to take
Mr. Salvatore,
the
please confine your remarks to the issue before you and not be calling people out of order.
I don't mind confining my remarks, but people should start listening around here. This isn't not...
Well, what it looks like is you wanted this on for discussion, but it appears that the only discussion you want is something that you agree with. If people ask you questions,
no, I think that's what you want.
You're not willing to respond to their questions, so we'll move for further
I did
discussion.
Respond to the question. That's my answer.
Mancini, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Go ahead, Mr. Mancini.
To Councilman Salvatore, before I ask my question, one thing I do want to say is that I know we had some orientation back at the end of 215. If I'm not mistaken, we had 2 meetings, and I don't want to beat this up all night, and we worked hard on some of them changes, and a few of them were mine. A few of them were mine. So what my question would be, I mean, you did cover that we're going to require a majority of vote of council to adjourn. Okay. Are you saying that you want to just completely go back to the, if I hear you right, you just want to go back to the 215 rules? The previous rules that are here right now, except for the one that you had just kind of made a change before, requires a majority of council to adjourn a meeting.
Correct.
And for a point of information, with your question, I will tell you that when we had that meeting in January, Councilman Salvatore did make a motion to just adopt the 2014-2015 council rules that were in existence at that time, and that motion failed for lack of a second. So back in January of 2016, he attempted to do the same thing, and it didn't have support.
I'll do that vote again, and won't happen again.
Trying to do it again. So that's just for a point of information. Councilwoman McDonald, you had your hand up.
Yeah, can I ask a question about the current rules, or am I only discussing?
It's pretty open-ended discussion about our council rules.
Okay.
So.
Because one of the biggest things when I was comparing them is, and because I wasn't here, I'm kind of late in the game, what was the discussion, or maybe I can look at minutes as far as the website and the separate emails, how did that come about? Because it isn't mentioned in the 14-15, and then we have them now. So can I have information about like how that came about? Like what was that decided?
Councilman Troyer?
I just have a question. When were you comparing them?
The 14, they were in our packet. The 14-15 rules were in our packet over the weekend.
Well, how did you know to compare them to the current rules?
Because what I did is I looked at them because I wanted to know what was different.
How did you know that? How did you know what the changes were going to be?
I didn't know what the changes was, but anybody who gets information compares information they had to information they have now.
But you didn't. We didn't know what changes were going to be requested.
She compared the old to the new.
But wouldn't you want to?
If you knew that that's what the changes were going to be, you'd know to compare it. But how would you know to compare it?
Well, I think when you start researching something, you start from basis and you look what you have now versus what you had before, and really, anybody would look and see what you did in the past versus what you're doing in the present. Regardless of what changes would be made to know what's different. That's a huge difference from last year to this year. So what I did is I highlighted what was missing and what was added so that when I came here today, I could ask my questions. So I don't think I had, if you're suggesting I had an agenda or something, that's not the case. I was comparing 2 documents I was given.
The question is how would you know to compare them?
Sure.
Why wouldn't you compare something you were given?
You've asked the question. She's answered. She's provided an answer.
I guess I'm not understanding your question.
And there were some good changes in there.
Again,
in the 2016-17.
Not saying good or bad, just saying comparing apples to apples to see what was there, what was changed, why it was changed. That's part of a discussion, right?
if you're told that the change is going to be to change it back to 2014,
Okay.
2015, yes, that's part of the discussion.
Okay.
And if I would have known that was going to be part of the discussion, I would have done the same thing and highlighted what the change things would have been eliminated in our current council rules. But since I didn't know what those changes were going to be, that information was not provided, I was not able to go in and I did not go in and compare them and make those notes. Now I will now.
Okay.
And as a senior councilman, tried to make it like I don't know how to do this, but the problem is if I don't waste time doing things, because I got a lot on my plate, doing things that when I don't have any information on what I should be looking at. Now I know what to look at. Now I can go home and I can compare the two and find out what the differences are.
So
But
can
you also have the fact that the senior councilman cannot express what the changes that he wants at this council meeting when he wants to talk about those changes. And it's at this point, it's up to me to start comparing, go through the list at the last minute and try to figure out what the changes were, what changes are going to go back to. So, it's just another one of those things where it's something's thrown on there. You're not sure what it's about, and you have to wait to get to know what the changes were going to be. We didn't even know if it was going to be changes. It's just listed as a topic. So, at any rate, how can you discuss something you don't know what the changes are? We're supposed to be here discussing the 2014, 2015, and if I don't know what changes are expected to be made, how do I know what to look at and what to compare? How could anybody, not knowing that? You need, if it would have said, listen, we'd like to go back to the 2014, 2015 rules, except for this rule number, as you vocalized, then I would have been able to look at it and compare it to. But not knowing that, all I know is it said that the 2014, 2015 rules were going to be up for discussion, and that was all I knew. I didn't know what the changes, if there were going to be any changes, or that it was going to be a wholesale change back to those rules, except for a few changes. So again, if I would have had that information, I could have done it, and I'd be able to speak on those changes more adaptly. And at this point, it's hard to do that. And if we would have, if the senior councilman would go through them one at a time, we could probably have some discussion on the changes. But the senior councilman refuses to do that, even though he brought it forward. So this is where we're at. Thank you.
Councilman Scott?
No, I have no more. I have no. No, I'm not even going to address that. Forget it. I'm done. No, I'm done. No.
Okay, so you withdrawing your...
Oh yeah,
Okay.
without a doubt.
All right, thank you.
But oh, I do. Sorry. The
Taking that
council.
back? You're taking
No,
that
no,
back?
no.
Council-
I've got to answer. She asked a
Councilman Scott,
question
go
about
ahead.
the web. We had a January 4th, 25th, 2016 meeting. We had 12 rule changes, and that was one of the rule changes. So it was no, I'm sorry, it wasn't that. But we voted 4-3 for that to be approved. The new website. It wasn't a unanimous decision up here on that website. It was a 4-3 vote.
Do we get a lot of hits? Is it
Oh, I've never used
enough?
it.
I don't.
I'm trying to see, because when I see from the January 5th, the motion was to approve the 2016, 2017 council rules, and the roll call was, ayes were Powers, Troyer, Scott, Salvatore, Bergio, McCormick, and Mancini, and the nays were none. So these 2016, 2017 rules were adopted 7-0. They were unanimously adopted.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think Councilman Scott said it was 4-3 on that vote in January, and it was...
I just wanted to know why we
Well, no,
decided to.
I'm just providing, you were provided information saying there was a 4-3 vote. That
Okay,
not
I
everyone was in
appreciate that.
support of it. But the 2016, 2017 rules, I think it's important. It's an important piece of information to know that when we adopted those in January, it was a 7-0 vote that everyone said, yes, let's do these rules.
Let's do that roll. Let's do that vote again. Let's see what happens.
Have we gotten information as far as are people in the city using this website in more so than going to the?
No, we don't. We don't get that information. We do not provide.
Do we have Google Analytics? Like, can you give me some information as far as like who the webmaster is and the domain and that kind of stuff for the email, for the website? And it doesn't necessarily have to be today. Like I said, I came here comparing because I really just wanted to know
If you want to provide me
specific questions.
what kind of information you're looking for, I will be able to get that for you, okay?
Writing. Email.
It would help me have it in writing, because
Totally.
then I know what you want.
Okay. I can do that. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Salvatore, go ahead.
I'd like to just respond to your comment that the rules were adopted unanimously, and you are correct, they were. I objected to the rule changes, and you know I did, but I did vote for them because I knew we couldn't start our new council season and the new members coming in and start the term without a set of rules. So I voted for a set of rules. I didn't exactly agree with every change that was made, but I did vote to adopt a set of rules so that we could function professionally. We have to have some type of rules, and that's what happened on that vote, and you know that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I did not imply anything with that vote. What I was doing, Councilman Salvatore, if you would please just afford me the opportunity of listening for 1 second. Councilman Scott had mentioned that the vote was 4-3. If you remember, when I responded, I said I'm going to provide a point of information here that the vote was 7-0. I didn't say that you were in full support of it. What I will say is that back in January, when you made the motion for 14-15 to apply, nobody up here seconded your motion, so nobody was in support of it back then. Obviously, that you must have some support of it now, or you're just willing to try it again. But you're trying to say that I implied that you were in full support. No, you voted to get the rules going. I understand that. What I was doing was just providing information because Mr. Scott was providing the wrong information to the councilwoman who asked the question. It was not a 4-3 vote. It was a 7-0 vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's all I was doing.
I appreciate
It
that
was
point of clarification.
And we were also told that this new council rules we had no council rules, that the 2014, 2015 rules were a business contract and they were no longer in a force. So that we were walking into the 2016, 2017 council rules without any rules running into the council season. So we had basically a take it or leave it, due to the fact that we were told that the 2014, 2015 council rules should be construed as a business contract and that they were null and void on December 31st, which, as after I found out, is nothing but a complete fallacy. Thank you.
Councilman, are you saying that the rules of council that are titled 2014, 2015 could have been in effect for 2016, 2017?
Yeah. All we had to do is change the date.
That could have been the simple change that could have been made, but it was not made.
Well, we were told that we had no contract.
Who told you that?
You did.
I said we could not have the rules of council where they are dated 2014, 2015 because it was 2016 and they wouldn't be in effect. Yes, the minimal change would have been you would have changed it to 2016, 2017. Council did not do that. Maybe you had a failure to understand how you modify. There had to be a modification, at least to the title of it. And you've seen that with many contracts that have come across the desk for legislation. They don't leave the same dates on there for the contracts. They have to update the dates so that it's effective a certain period of time. So there was no fallacy other than maybe your failure to understand it properly. Councilman Mancini.
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chairman. I'd kind of like to get moving on this. Just real quick, going back to my colleague here, Rachel, Councilwoman. If I'm not mistaken, what you're saying is, I mean, your way of looking at things and studying things might be a lot different than mine.
Oh, totally.
You might have looked at this like I did, 214, 215 council rule changes. I actually thought he was going to bring up a couple changes. Possibly one was audience participation, because I was one that loved to charge at the end, okay, to speak at the end. That's how I always felt. Not everybody agrees, but that was one of my rule changes. So I thought things like that were going to come up. Seeing you and my colleague Councilman Troyer was kind of saying, well, he kind of thought you were kind of getting tipped off what was coming. There's times I agree with him up here, but not on that one. I believe that you look at things a different way. You're an educator, so you studied. You must have seen not speaking for you, you've seen 214, 215, says, well, wow, wonder what them, and so you looked in here, and you already had known what we had for our new rules for 16 and 17, so you compared. That might be your way of looking at things, and the times I've known you, I always know you have your face in a book, or you always, you know, so that's, I want to cover you on that, because I just didn't think that was a fair kind of a, take a little poke at you there. But on that, I'd kind of like to start moving ahead here, because Councilman Salvatore said he'd like to go back to the rules. He made the one change, requires a majority of council. So if we want to discuss that or any other changes, I want to speak for my colleague, the council president, but I think it's time to move on here with this piece here and on discussion for the 214, 215 rule changes. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Bergio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may just add, I think some of the council members might remember when the rules were changed that we thought we'd give them like 6 months to see how they would work out. I think we did that. It's been like 3 times as long as like been 18 months. So I think it's appropriate that we take a look at and discuss the council rules and see which ones really worked better in 2014-15 and maybe make some changes to it. So I think it's totally appropriate to discuss it and revisit this, and looking forward to discussing it with everybody and maybe make the changes that I think a lot of the rules that we had in 2014 worked very well. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I somewhat concur with Councilman Bergio. If we're talking about wholesale changes back to what we had, I'm totally against that, because there were some good changes in there. If we're talking about looking at it and maybe changes, I probably will be changing some things back. I'll probably be against them too, but that's I could see that. I have concern with the Rule 28, which is about our email communications and our website. If that's eliminated, I think that hurts the residents' ability to get information of what council's doing, and I think that'd be totally wrong. You know, we were supposed to have a, not as part of this, but we were supposed to have a council newsletter, and that didn't happen for various reasons, and I think that's probably okay. But I mean, I'd like to have it, but there's reasons it didn't work out. So, but having a council website where everything's up to date as far as our legislation, what's on the agenda, what got passed. And in most cases I hear people are looking for things on the city website and it's not there. So, you know, I think it's our duty to have this website up and running and have all our information as far as what we're doing posted on it. So I would not like to see that one go. So I'm happy to talk about it, but I think a wholesale change is wrong. I think individual changes should have been brought forward to adjust it, as we always say we would. But the wholesale change of going back to the old rules is just wrong, and I'd absolutely be against that. That's it. Thank you.
Councilman Bergio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Mr. Troyer, some of those, I agree with some of those things. I never did say wholesale changes, though. I think there's some things that we do need to look at. And I think as far as the website, to be honest with you, I think it's been a total flop. I really don't think it really materialized in what we all thought it was going to be. And I don't know, it just has never materialized. And so I'm not sure if it's worth revisiting that and having it. But that's just my opinion. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
You talking about these rules?
So,
What's your question, Councilman? Yeah, asking for, he's got a
Thank
question
you.
for you, Councilman.
Through the chair to Councilman Bergio, you said it's kind of been a disaster. Is there any particular thing that's been a disaster?
I couldn't hear you.
You had said that these 16, 17 rules were on the website. Okay, all right. I thought you were talking about the rule changes.
No.
Okay,
I just meant the website.
Corrected. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to be very, very poignant there, and thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilwoman McDonald?
So, in the essence of discussion and time, can I make a proposal to put this back on the next caucus meeting where everybody has a time to compare the old and the new, analyze and think about what changes were effective, what changes weren't effective, to come back so that everybody's on the same page as far per his discussion? And then we can get more information as far as how many data hits and stuff we actually have gotten to the website. because that would be an interesting to see. Every time someone visits a website, there's a way you can document and see how many hits it gets. But I don't know how to do that yet. So
Okay,
can
so
I do that?
So your motion is to place this item number 1 on the next caucus agenda for discussion, for further discussion?
Yes.
Is there support for that motion?
Yes.
Is there any discussion on the motion? The motion is to place the 2014-2015 Rules of Council on the next caucus agenda for under discussion.
Worded? Or did I look at the 16, 17?
Any discussion?
Okay. Yes.
Councilman Troyer.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Would we want to include 16 and 17
Yes,
with
please.
that motion?
Yes.
Have them both on there?
Well, I think the discussion today has at least clarified what the intent is of placing it on the agenda. You can add it in there. You know, we could just say that if you want to make your motion that we will discuss the council rules.
I think
at the
that would
next
be,
caucus
I think
agenda.
that would be a little more clear, because what I'm seeing is that I kind of agree with a lot of people that have been said, is that if there's rules in 16, 17 that are working better than some of the 14, 15, then keep those. But if there's something that needs to be improved or tweaked, then we can discuss that and then move forward to have an even better set of rules. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
It does to me. I'm not sure it does to everyone else. but
Well, I
it does
just
to
wanted
me.
to make sure that
So
that's
the motion
what my
the
motion
motion that you'll
is.
make is to place the council rules on the discussion for the next caucus agenda.
Yes.
Support.
Got
That's
quite a
been
while
supported.
for that.
Is there any other discussion on the motion? Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I have to preface this with, yes, I'll be voting yes on this motion since I seconded it. But the reason is I definitely want to talk about this. I just want to mention that I use the website often to go and look up legislation that we passed and the date we passed it. So I use it often. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other discussion, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll on the motion to place the council rules on the next caucus agenda.
McDonald,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
Mancini,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Okay, so the council rules, item number 1. I need a motion that item number 1 was discussed.
So made.
Second.
Is that you or her? Okay.
Jan.
Okay, the motion is item number 1 has been discussed. It's been properly supported. Seeing no discussion, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Troyer,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Mancini,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Salvatore.
Yes.
Okay, item number 1 has been discussed. We'll move to item number 2, which is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Axon Enterprise, Inc. So, for discussion, Mr. Mayor, I'll ask you to
Thank you,
introduce
Mr.
it.
Chairman. I have the chief here this evening to speak on these two ordinances, so if you allowed him to make his presentation, we'd
Chief
appreciate
Foster,
it.
if you'd come to the podium, please. You'll have to raise the microphone up for yourself.
James Foster, Chief of Police, Brook Park Police Department, 17401 Holland Road. Okay. Go ahead.
Chief, you want to address the issue about the sole source of the tasers? 'Cause legislation requires without public bidding. You might want to explain the need for the 30 new tasers and why it's a sole source purchase.
Well, good evening, Council, and thank you for inviting me here. What I'd like to do is explain that our tasers are over their warranty period. It's time to just change them. The taser is a unique device for police departments. We've researched, what other vendors would be available, and Exxon is the name of the company of taser. So when you see the company Exxon, AXON, that is taser. So taser is a standard Like I say, we're all out of the warranty period. They're starting to fail. We have 3 that have failed, so it's time to replace them. And the manufacturer, dealing directly with the manufacturing, they offer a unique pricing. They offer a 5-year lease to own option instead of buying one from a law enforcement dealer where you would pay over $60,000 for them in one lump sum. They have spread it out over 5 years, and they also are giving us a one-time credit for each of our used tasers, $100, and they would credit that for the first payment, which comes to $3,000. We currently have 30 tasers.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Okay, council, you have any questions to the chief or the mayor? Councilwoman McDonald?
I actually do have some questions on tasers. I'm very interested in this. All right, so who uses the tasers within our city? All the police officers or just specific people?
All the police officers are trained in it and carry them.
And what are the benefits of using them? I guess for people who don't know, what are the benefits of using a taser?
The taser is considered a less lethal weapon. Obviously, a firearm is a lethal weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Less lethal gives us the option of using force when it's justified in using it to effect normally an arrest. It goes along the lines of a baton and/or pepper spray.
Okay.
Go ahead. Taser is very effective, not only for our city but throughout the United States. The pepper spray. It contaminates anybody that's in the area.
Okay.
Sometimes it causes more problems than it eliminates. The taser is very effective and is commonly used and defended.
So is there a hierarchy of like what tools you're supposed to use if you come in contact with someone who is
Yes, there's a use of force
aggressive?
continuum.
Okay.
Like passive resistance, they're prohibited. We would not use it on somebody that was peacefully protesting and maybe laying in front of a driveway or something. An officer would not use it for that type of situation. It's a type of situation when they're becoming overpowered,
okay,
or somebody's out of control and they're unable just to physically stop that person.
Can you use them on animals?
You can use them on animals, and we've used them, I believe it was this year and end of last year, on one animal, a dog that was out of control, and they were in fear of it biting them.
And then is there a specific amount? So every 5 years you're supposed to update them, or it just depends on how many times they're used? Or
they're an electronic device. The manufacturer warranties them for 5 years. We've gone approximately 10 years.
Wow.
And they're a quality item. We've closely monitored it. If they started to fail a couple years ago, I would have asked, put in a bid to try to get them sooner. We're watching everything we have, and fortunately, we were able to get over 10 years out of them.
So by sticking with this specific company, you get more leeway as far as maybe not going. If you can take a taser and make it last 7 years versus the 5 years, they're more willing to work with you because you're like a repeated customer.
This is just a special pricing that the manufacturer has. Normally, the manufacturer sells it to the law enforcement dealers, and you buy from them.
So you're going directly to the manufacturer.
Going directly through them. They had a special at this time.
Okay.
We're taking full advantage of it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman.
Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Thanks for coming, Chief.
Thank you.
One of my questions was the warranty period. That's been answered. Just a little more about why these are exclusive. And Axon is to taser as I think Kimberly Clark makes Kleenex. I'm not sure, but something like that. So that's what you're saying? It's kind of the people use taser, but it's actually their name and the company uses that for their. Is there another name for tasers? Is what I'm guessing.
Taser is the company that is the manufacturers. I think Exxon is the parent company.
Right. Oh. Is there another name? Does anybody else make these?
There are some other manufacturers, but I have not heard any that have really been worth researching.
And what do they call them? What's the generic name? If it's not
they're an electronic device, IEDs, I believe they're called. They do sell like a public version, some companies, they're less reliable.
But generally for police, this is what they use? Police?
Yes, they're proven.
Law enforcement, I should say.
Law enforcement, they only sell to law enforcement. They're rugged. I mean, the officers may not use them very often, thank God, but they're with them all the time in the weather, hot, cold. Right. You know, they're very well made. And
have we ever used any other brand?
We have not. Okay,
because there isn't one that's acceptable. Would that be why?
That would be correct.
Okay. All right, and these new ones, it looks like about a 5-year warranty on those also?
The manufacturer only offers a 5-year warranty, so we would probably repeat, go 5 years. Obviously, it's a replacement. If something fails, they immediately replace. And then after the 5th year, we'll monitor how these have held up, and we'll try to keep them as long as we can, as long as they're reliable.
Right. Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Councilman Mancini?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, again, also too, thank you for coming. A couple things real quick. Obviously, this Axon Enterprises is the big player in town, and I imagine, is that other departments use them? Is this a thing like across country, things of that sort that use them? You said they don't really sell to the public, so they're the player.
They're the law enforcement standard. I don't know of any other brand that's being used in Cuyahoga County. Okay.
The other question I have is, I know you guys ain't, thank God, you ain't tasing people every day. When you have used these devices tend to work pretty...
They're effective. They're very effective. You know, they used to require the officers to be tased themselves. They no longer require that. And like I said, it incapacitates the person for 5 seconds.
Okay. And all right, it's about all I have. I'd like to maybe one day get a demonstration. We could use my colleague Councilman Troyer over there. All right, Tommy, I'm just kidding over there. All right, thank you, Chief, for coming. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Councilman Bergio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know how to follow that one up. I'll try.
You could volunteer for it.
No, thanks. Chief, what are the training cartridges? What are those?
To be certified and then recertified, they're required to operate and fire the taser. Normally, we've require it part of the training yearly. To be recertified, we require them to actually fire it twice. With this, that's been the past practice, and we're still only requiring it twice. However, with this manufacturing special, they'll provide 3 cartridges per officer per year. So they're increasing it an additional 1, which allows for better training, and there's no additional cost. Those cartridges cost approximately $25 each.
So who trains the officers to use this?
We have certified instructors from Taser that offer, that train our officers.
Okay, so that's all included then, the training and so forth. It's all included then.
Yes, he was trained, and he continues his instructor license through Taser.
Okay. Is there what effect does that have besides incapacitating somebody? What if somebody had a bad heart? Does that affect them as far as possible heart attack or anything like that from that? Or
from the literature that they provide, in our experience, we're told that it will not have any effect.
Right.
However, part of the consideration in training is we will take the well-being of the person
under consideration
before they would use that. The totality of the circumstances.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you, Chief.
Councilwoman Powers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief. And how many, we're ordering 30. Do we really need 30 all at one purchase time? How many police cars do we have on the street at any given time?
I understand the question. That's a good question. We initially had bought, I think, 12 tasers about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and we rotated them around. Those are the ones that began to fail in 5 years. So with law enforcement money, which is the seized money through drug arrest, I bought enough one for each officers, and the recommendation and experience of other departments saying that if you have one officer take care of it, it seems to last longer. It stays in the holster. You're taking it out, putting it, you're moving it more, you're handling it more, and it actually causes further problems. This purchase, if you look at the funding, half of the money is through the capital, through council. The other half will be funded by the drug money, 270. Is that correct, Mr. Single? Yeah, that's the way I requested it, and I believe that's the way I read it. So it's not, the discretionary money from the drug enforcement fund is paying for half of this.
And how many, okay, they have them out there. If you're in a situation where you need to taser someone and you don't have time to say, don't taser them in the neck or don't taser them near the heart, or you just have to hit them anywhere, and is there a safer way to do that? Or, how do we know that it doesn't cause a heart attack or something like that?
I mean, they've been used for decades now, and I know it's been, in litigation, and their manufacturing, they certainly would update us, I believe, and outlaw it if it was to that effect, through their updates and training. Most of the problems, from what I understand, is it's after the person is tased, it's what happens afterwards. If the person passes out, that's happened, because sometimes when people are out of control, it's actually a medical emergency. There's something biologically going on with them, and we've been trained, and we will call the squad immediately for an evaluation. Years ago, perhaps, they would maybe use the taser and then just throw him in jail saying he's out of control. But we will monitor it, and as part of our training is we'll evaluate the individual, and if, through their judgment and through the supervisor's response, because he's required to be there too, they'll decide whether or not, a paramedic would respond. And that's been the standard, and that's what I demand of the officers, and that's in the policy.
And then one other question, and I'll let you go, is the using this same distributor all the time. It's like, isn't it a good idea to occasionally go out and see what somebody else has rather than just going back to the same company? It's kind of like a no bid. In that case, it's kind of like a no bid contract. It's we don't know what else is available.
I have attended the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference. All the vendors in the world are there, and obviously I was anticipating this year getting them. I researched the vendors there to see what they have, and Taser clearly was the company that was recommended. Talking to the Cuyahoga County Police Chiefs Association, the other chiefs that are in Cuyahoga County locally, they have found nothing or recommended another vendor for this.
So we have, what, 30 policemen total, but we need 30 tasers? We don't share, we don't just leave them in the car for the next shift to use them?
I had explained that we used to do that.
I know, yeah.
And they failed after 5 years. And I don't want to chance the failure, whether it goes 4.5 years or 5 years, or they get dropped or mishandled or something when the officer's carrying in his gear. Those things happen like any other thing. So the officer's going to take it apart, put it back together, make sure everything's in every time he sees it. When the officer has it in his holster and he locks it up at night, he knows nobody has touched that, and he's prepared to go out because he knows the reliability of it. I think that's been proven that we've been able to stretch that double the time by keeping it. We've done the same thing with radios. It used to be with the radios we had limited amount and we used to share them, but the batteries would fatigue. The radios, which is our heartline to communications, were failing too many times. So, fortunately through our agreement with Cleveland, and they bought all new radios for us with our agreement, and every officer has a radio, and they have lasted much longer. Again, they take care of it, they're responsible for it. If something goes wrong with it, they're assigned that radio, we ask them what happened. So they know they're accountable for it. I think it's a better practice And if it didn't, if I thought it's just a waste of money, I certainly wouldn't do it. It isn't. I'm trying to maximize the effectiveness of this.
And you feel that the 5-year contract is pretty much the life expectancy of one of these tasers?
That's what they want. That's the only warranty available. There's no other company or nobody else that will warranty it afterwards, as far as I know. We would certainly inquire after the 5 years, and hopefully, if there is one available, we'll do a cost analysis and see if it's worth keeping that going.
All right. Thank you, Chief Foster.
Thank you, Councilman Powers.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. Tasers, just like a side firearm for a policeman. It's no different than his bulletproof vest, his flashlight, or his radio. Each one should have its own. These are important because two things, the safety and the liability of the officer. Let's hope that if it's a tough situation that the officer has the opportunity to taser somebody as opposed to discharge their firearm. Let's hope that opportunity is there. But let's also realize why we should have these lease warranty agreements, because we have had people, including in our jail, that were tasered more than once, and they just kept on coming. So it's really important that that functions as well as the firearm. And just like the firearm, the police have to continually be certified on them and be trained. We're excited about the uniqueness of the manufacturer offering this lease purchase deal with the city. After the 5-year period, we own them. If they're not functional, we get new ones. If some of them are still functional, we keep them. All right, so that's what's good about this particular situation. And I think that in this instance here, I'm grateful that the chief did the research and found this, because we wouldn't have been aware of it otherwise. So it shows why it's important for our folks to go to some of these events around the country where they show the different things that we have. And as always, we don't want to send our police out there without everything at their disposal, every tool at their disposal to protect themselves and the general public of the city or people coming through. So we'd appreciate council's consideration of this contract moving forward.
Councilman Mancini.
Thank you for recognizing me, Council President. Chief, on this one, I'm not going to mince my words. I don't think there's a gray area. I want our officers to know their weapon. Whether it's a taser or a gun, I want them to know every little bit of part of it, whether it's working. I want him to have that. Hopefully they never have to use either. I mean, that's obviously the key, and we hope that. But even in our little city here, Brook Park, I mean, you see and hear every day in the news. This isn't maybe an area where we should even have had this much of a debate. You know, if you tell me these are great products, and I got to go with it. I mean, these guys need the best protection we could give them, you know. So that's how I feel on this. Thank you again, Chief. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Mancini.
Go ahead, Councilman Salvatore.
A motion to place on the next council agenda.
Support.
You know, I'd like to actually ask a question first before we do that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because and I'm not sure if it's. I know from when we've had talks about the budget. I know you work with the finance director pretty closely under the 270 account. I did look through this, and I saw that and I guess it's either to you, Chief Foster, or Finance Director Single, that on the list of capital improvements that we had, the tasers were listed as $20,000 for the council portion under capital improvement. This ordinance is, for one thing, the body of the ordinance doesn't actually list what the cost is in the ordinance, but is the cost $60,000 or 61 something?
Over the 5-year lease, the total is $61,875, and they also give a $100 credit for each of the ones we're turning in, so that's with a $3,000 credit.
Okay, then maybe
I can explain.
if you
with
can
the
explain
20
the cost discrepancy.
Okay, well, therefore, actually the lease payment annually is less than the 20th, like when we lease the trucks. we would have what the annual lease payment would be in the appropriation. So between the two, if we split it 50-50 between, it actually is less than a $20,000 capital when we do that. So it's $12,000 a year. So presently, just in the capital, we have more than enough to cover the total lease.
Correct. I would put that in the budget next year.
Okay.
Right. As you recall, I said when I do it in the beginning, I put what I think the purchase is going to be, and then we adjusted for the lease payments.
I had attended the conference in October, and that was about the time the mayor had asked me for the budget, and that's what we put in for. It was a little bit high, obviously with the 20, but that covered the whole amount.
So the lease payment would be split 6 from capital and 6 from the law enforcement fund.
Mr. Single, you're shaking your head yes. So it's going to be a little over $5,000 a year that we, or 12,000,
yeah,
over 12,000 a year.
For this year, the amount, if my math's correct, $5,480 out of the capital, police department capital, and $5,480 out of the law enforcement fund, Fund 270. Then next year, half of $12,960 would come out of Fund 270, and the other half would come out of the capital for the police department, 401, 412.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Council, for allowing me to clarify that. So, Councilman Salvatore, you want to make your motion again?
Motion to place on next council agenda.
Support.
Okay, there's a motion to place this ordinance on the next council agenda. It's been properly supported. Seeing no discussion, I'll ask the clerk please call the roll.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Mancini,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
Okay, item number 2 will be placed on the next council agenda. Motion was discussed. Still need the motion was discussed?
No.
Since it took action?
Right.
Making sure. Okay, item number 3 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Bob Gillingham Ford for the purchase of 4 new 2017 Ford Utility Interceptor SUVs. Mr. Mayor, would you like to introduce this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you can see by the ordinance, we have the state purchasing, and we went out and sought other bids on this. I'll let the chief, and I think probably the finance director would like to speak as the difficulties we had with state purchasing last year. So in an effort to get us the best price and delivery and financing of the vehicles, I asked the chief to go out and seek other bids. And I think he can explain to you the difficulty on the delivery of the cars. And I think Greg can speak a little bit to the painstaking efforts we had to go through on the leasing and other logistical issues we had with the state purchasing program. So, Chief?
Yeah, the state pricing for the motor vehicles, for the police vehicles, I wish the state pricing, went much smoother, and I'm willing to work with the state pricing and do what, we need to do and cross all the T's and dot all the I's. We had ordered 4 previously, and we had, from the state vendor who was in the Columbus area, we received 2 that immediately went into patrol. Approximately a month or 2 later, we received the 3rd one, and I am still waiting for the 4th one. And I was told I was contacted. Sergeant Slominski, who is my fleet manager for the police department, is the contact person. And he said that the demand was, well, they want the vehicle early next week, and they should have it turned around in about 2 weeks.
Chief, clarify that. That's the 2016 purchase.
Yes, this is the 2016 purchase. And I said, well, Sarge, that's home days. We need every car. That's one of the reasons why you see so many cars. When there is a problem, we don't have enough cars for home days. But again, we try to balance our fleet. And I know I'll go back there and I go, boy, it looks like we have a lot of cars. But when push come to shove, when there's an event, or we take advantage of every vehicle. So I'm still waiting. So we went back and forth, and I said, I'm willing for them to have the car taken out of service, remove the equipment, transfer that equipment down to Columbus, have them build the car, meaning we just buy the vehicle. The light bars, they don't actually do that. They subcontract that out. You don't have a Ford or whatever vendor actually doing it. They actually subcontract that out. So they're dealing with another vendor. So, and it's been this type of experience throughout. And again, I don't mind little delays, but when they came back after we waited, you know, the last car I got was in March, and I'm waiting 3 months, and they tell us, get ready because we want your car this date. You know, we're the customer. So I told them that's not the way it's going to work. They're not going to have my vehicle out of commission during home days and the 4th of July. So I told them push it back. So again, there was dialogue, and this is what we deal with, and we're dealing with Columbus, so a dealership in Columbus. That dealership, when they did do the work, they did a fine job. I'll grant you that. They, you know, and they stood behind their product. They don't have the state contract anymore. Another company won it for this order, and that's who's listed as number 1 on the literature here. They're down in Cincinnati, and again, it's a vendor that we're dealing in Cincinnati, and the person that one person at the dealership is the representative for the state pricing for police vehicles. He's been on medical leave, and since we started this process. His assistants, who say that they're trying to cover for him, did everything they can, but they're not the person trained to deal in this pricing. So everybody that dealt with this, the finance department, the mayor, the safety director, you know, have heard the complaining that I've kind of said going through all these. You know, we're buying cars from them. You know, come on, help us out here. We're a customer. So we decided that, and it was a good idea. Let's get local bids. You know, we went to talk to Berea. They just bought a car from Kowalski. They took bids, and they were the dealership over there. All right, so some of the local dealers can order the Police Interceptor model and do the changeover. So we seeked local bids. We went to Kowalski. Well, they did it for Berea, but they said they're out of the business. They're not doing it any longer, and they cited just issues and the trouble with it. So we went to Auto Nation, same thing. They said they're not going through this. So we contacted other police agencies. That deal with that have Fords. Not every city has Fords. I talked to Brooklyn. They said they went and got their police vehicle from Gillingham, and they had an outstanding experience with them. So we seeked bids from them, just like we had tried to seek from Kowalski and Auto Nation. They gave us a bid. So did the Lebanon Ford and Statewide Ford that are listed in hopefully the attachments you have. Gillingham Ford came out the next day, had 2 representatives, seemed to ask the right questions, knew what they were doing. They said they want our business. They continue to do this. And then within a day or 2, they had a quote written for us. We felt that they provided outstanding service. They said they would not charge any kind of destination fee for moving vehicles if there was a problem. The sergeant said night and day, no comparison. This local dealer wants our business. We got a satisfied neighbor, and let's give them a try. Let's give this company a try. My understanding is we want the lowest but best. And believe me, I don't want to spend a dime more than I have to, but if it was up to me, personally, in my vehicle, I would go ahead and go with Gillingham Ford. So those are the problems we've had. The dollar amount, it is a little bit cheaper through Lebanon, and if that's what you want us to go, we will go with it, but it will be a frustrating time, and I can't give you a date on when we're going to get the cars.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if Greg wants to comment or not, but for me, a difference of $6,800. The logistics work out for us best, and that's why we're recommending going with Gillingham, because we believe they're the best bidder in the valuation. I don't know if Greg wants to talk about what we had to go through with the finance department, but it's up to you.
Go ahead, Mr. Single.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I would add is these vehicles will be leased. It'll be a 3-year lease, and it'll be paid for out of the capital improvement fund for the police department. So in section 2, I would ask council to amend the legislation to remove fund number 270, law enforcement fund, and it's properly budgeted for this year.
Yes.
I'll make make a motion then.
Motion to amend?
Motion to amend.
So, Mr. Single, you're just suggesting that we just delete out the fund number 270, law enforcement fund?
Yes, sir.
Again, motion to amend.
So, second.
Okay, so for clarification, that new section, we would be deleting out where it says, it'll say the money needed for the aforesaid transaction shall be paid from, and we will delete out fund number 270 law enforcement fund and, so it'll read shall be paid from fund number 401 capital fund theretofore appropriated or to be appropriated for said purpose. Is that correct, Mr. Single? Okay, motion been properly made, supported. Any other discussion? Questions?
Okay. Got passed?
I think Councilman Mancini and Troyer, they like to deal with the police stuff together. Tasers, cars. Okay, seeing no other discussion,
Hopefully
clerk, please
not
call
in
the
jail.
roll.
Mancini,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Okay, the amendment has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other presentations, Chief? Any other information? Council, any questions to the Chief? Councilman Troyer?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Sorry, Chief, just a few minutes longer. I just have, I understand the bidding. I understand why you want to go with Gillingham. In fact, I bought my first brand new car there many years ago. I just have a question or concern about the engine. So my first question is, which could relieve my, do any of our vehicles, the Tauruses, do any of them have the twin turbo, the 3.5?
The EcoBoost?
EcoBoost, yeah.
You know, when they announced the EcoBoost, I really was looking forward to having them. Again, when we did our research, we were one of the first agencies to have the Ford Explorer in the West Side. We actually got the first order. And I was looking forward to it, but there was a lot of caution about it. It has a turbocharge. It's a $3,000 more, approximately $3,000 more per car accessory, and it sounds good. I mean, a police vehicle, you want it to be strong. However, the maintenance of them, including our maintenance garage, John, our head mechanic, warned that he had heard that it has higher maintenance, which to me means we have more downtime, which is not good. The current engine is approximately 305 horsepower, which is higher than the Crown Victorias were on their police interceptor package. I know the SUV is a little bit heavier, but we have waited and you know, whether we should go with it. We wait about maybe going with one or two. But again, John cautioned that now I have two parts that I have to keep stock of, and I have to train, you know, a mechanic in that one or two or three vehicles. So monitoring it, watching it, and listening to feedback from the other agencies, I was told that approximately 90% of the SUVs that are sold by Ford do not have the EcoBoost. I believe the Highway Patrol has the EcoBoost engine, but their duty is on the interstates all day long. So I could see their need of having something like that. But I decided not to, based on the opinion of our mechanic and the other mechanics that I've spoke to on a personal level, plus the other police chiefs in other agencies.
Because yeah, my concern is, because I checked on this today, yes, it's the EcoBoost is about $3,000 more. It's substantially more horsepower, 365, 350 foot-pounds of torque, which is what they need to get out there. My concern is the safety of the police officers when we're running traffic patrol on the interstates. So that's why I kind of believe that we should have a couple for doing that. Now, it should probably be in the Taurus version and the sedan version. So that's why I was asking if any of our cars have it. Can you tell me when do we see replacing some of our sedans?
I was talking to Sergeant Szyminski again. He's our fleet manager, and we deal with John. You know, obviously he's the expert as far as looking at the car and telling us its wear and tear. We still have 2 Crown Victorias, which, you know, he recommended us keeping, and they're still in service. So we would go by what his judgment was overall, plus, you know, the reliability. They're still reliable. They both have approximately 60,000 miles on them. They're not driven as much as the SUVs. The main complaint is, again, with all the equipment the officers have, they're just too small.
Okay.
They're just a hair too small, and that's why they don't want to use them.
So I agree with you on and everybody that in normal city patrol and everything, yeah, the 3.7 liters fine. But I talked to I checked on this. I'm just trying to figure out, just trying to have somebody from a Ford dealership tell me where that 3.7 is manufactured. Because my first issue was, what are we doing buying an engine that's not made here, buying a vehicle with a engine that's not made here in Brook Park? I mean, that was my first concern. But I understand how that all works. I got some information on that. It's not as bad. But I was told Brattonall, and again, because it's mostly highway, they used the 3.5, the twin turbo EcoBoost, and then, like you said, the highway patrol. So in the future, I mean, I'm fine with this if that's what you guys want. But in the future, I think for the safety of our police officers, that we should get the EcoBoost if we're going to be doing patrol on these highways in a future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions to Councilwoman Powers?
What is the life expectancy of a normal fleet car, and what is the life expectancy of these SUVs? How many miles a year is the average to put on a police car?
Currently, we're putting up approximately about 120,000 on them before we retire them. Again, those are driven miles. They also have an hour clock on them. Obviously, the idle time on these are, they say sometimes it's like you could 2 or 3 times the mileage, because, accident scenes and things, they're just sitting there idling. So it does have some issues that, we'll evaluate. We have one cruiser that the engine failed on, and it was replaced, but it's one of the older ones with higher mileage. So, but it's got a new engine. So we're going to keep that in there, or we were ready to get rid of it because it had so many miles. But now we're going to keep it because it has a brand new engine. The other advantage that we work with the service department on and the mechanics, and that was, putting wraps on these vehicles instead of having them painted. When you paint the black and white, that's a color scheme that our city has. That's like an additional $1,500 or more. The wraps they're basically stickers. We put them on there when we go to sell them or reuse them. They basically peel off. If you notice, I believe the building department has 1 or 2, and the service department may have one. They're the pure black SUVs. Those are working fine in the city as secondary vehicles for the city. They are made that tough, where I think they'll have a life expectancy that we'll find out here as the years go by. But if we time it just right, we may be able to get 5 more years out of them, out of the building. If we keep them maybe 6 months longer at the police department, they may be junk.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You done? Okay, Councilman Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, I hope you concur, and the mayor too. I want to give a little shout out. Now, you kind of brought something to my attention. I think the guys down the mechanics area, down at the service garage with all our vehicles, safety vehicles, do a really good job. And the vehicles, not only in the early years and the later years, do a great job keeping them vehicles high maintenance. I think they do a great job. I just wanted to say that, though. Okay.
I agree. The auxiliary cars, they're 2008s, and the service garage has completely did the body work to them and repainted them, and they look great. They look just as good as brand new, but they're actually 2008 vehicles. They're not involved with pursuits, or they should never be involved. So the cars are working fine, and they keep them up fantastically. Snow road construction, those are the cars that we're using, the 2008s. out there, you know, if you drive by it. We're not trying to use our brand new SUVs, you know, when it's all dust and dirt and rocks being thrown out there. So again, we try to manage things accordingly to where they're going to be, because they get filthy dirty and they get all marked up with stones and rocks and dings.
Mr. Chairman.
Mayor, go ahead. Oh, no, hold on. I'm sorry. Councilwoman McDonald.
Really quick, how much time do we patrol on the highways? I'm just curious.
It's part of the zone officers. I mean, obviously, he balances what he needs to do. We'll do traffic enforcement. Again, in Brook Park on the interstates, because of the junction and the exits and on-ramps and things, it's not an ideal place. It's riskier than just a stretch of a highway where you can pull off on the side and there's nobody merging on or merging off or looking at signs to change lanes. However, I give the officers credit for being up there. 480 north, or I'm sorry, I-71 north between Snow Road and the 480 junction, for 4 years in a row we had a fatality there.
Wow.
Since we emphasized traffic enforcement, there hasn't been any. So I know it's having an effect. When I first took, chief, the first, I think, 3 years as chief, we were having the fatalities there, and the next year we had we thought it was a fatality. It's just a bad area where people are coming up to 70. It's a slower speed limit there. People are used to going 70. They're still going 70, and then they're switching over 3 lanes. People are merging on at Snow Road, and the speed and the change has been deadly. But since we've been up there on a controlled basis, but they know we're up there. Luckily, somehow, there hasn't been a fatality up there.
Thank you.
That's it? Okay,
Thanks.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm not really concerned. The chief and I have had great debate about this. If I had my way, they wouldn't be on the interstates at all, because of the danger that it puts our officers in. And I was just last week at an event for tow operators. How many tow truck operators have been killed assisting people on the side of the road because people are texting or are doing whatever they're doing. We have been replacing 4 cars a year. We hope to keep doing that. I think that the maintenance of the vehicles tantamount to recognition of our mechanics in the service department. As you can see, those vehicles coming into service or coming into building where we didn't have to buy those. So that is helpful. When we were at the event, our motorcycles, which is another tool that we have in enforcement, were purchased in 2002. So they're about needed. As a matter of fact, I was kidding the chief at the event. It was kind of embarrassing that we have the Harley Davidson dealership in our town, and we had the worst looking motorcycles. And we're also going to be having our patrol of our policemen on bikes. You might have seen through the Border Control some of the things we've purchased. So the chief is using everything at his disposal, but I think if we turn the fleet over, I can remember a time when we got new cars every year. And we changed to 2 years. So again, I think we're doing a good job, and they're holding up, and mostly I think the wrap, I think if you'll see it in the bid here, you might wonder what that is. I think the chief explained it, but that gives us the ability to take these cars. Actually, it protects the car from getting scratched. It's amazing how good they look when they get it done. So I think that the department is doing a good job in managing the fleet. And again, we'd ask council consideration in getting this passed so we can get the cars here as quick as we can.
Okay, Councilman Troyer.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I guess this is either one. The 4 decommissioned vehicles, do we have plans for those yet?
We have what?
Plans for the 4 decommissioned vehicles?
The service department needs some more. I think building would have had the 2. We actually need 2 more for the building department. They have one of the Crown Victorias, but we've been waiting the delivery on the 1 police vehicle. So the answer to your question is yes, we're recycling. We took the Expedition from the fire department, and that has been recycled to the recreation department.
Okay, and then either one, who's doing the switchovers, and where's that being done at? The lights and everything?
That's part of the contract. We wanted to put it all together. Whoever wins the dealership from Ford they're responsible for doing the changeover, and the pricing is included. That's why there's a lot of difference between them. A lot of it has to do with the changeover.
Right, so is Gillingham going to do it there, or is Gillingham send it out to somebody?
Well, Gillingham's responsible for doing it. So whether they do it themselves or they have subcontractors, I would assume they have subcontractors, they'll do it. But what we found is if you get a vehicle, then you get a contractor that's going to do this, and there's any kind of problem, all of a sudden you got the dealer saying, well, he cut the wire, and this guy said, I didn't cut the wire, or Ford didn't make it right, and they didn't, so you go back and forth, and we were having, light bar issues, radio issues, because you have two vendors saying that it's the other one's fault, that when they did this, they moved that, and they shouldn't have did it. So we like to just keep it together, so if there's a problem, we just say, dealer, you won the package, fix it. Whether it's you or your subcontractor, make it right, and it's worked very well that way.
Okay, and I think that the mayor was saying is that they just switch everything over, then we get the decommissioned vehicle back. It'll still have the wraps on it, and then Mayor, our guys will take the wraps off and everything?
Yes.
Right, okay, thanks.
Council, any other questions? Council, a motion?
Motion to place on the next council agenda.
Support.
Okay, there's a motion to place this item on the next council agenda. It's been supported. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mancini,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Okay, item number 3 will be placed on the next council agenda. That concludes the items under number 4 for discussion. Go to page 2. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Council President.
Go to page 2 of the agenda. Under number 5 is the Legislative Committee. We'll go to Chairman Troyer.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Get ready here. Legislative Committee has 6 items on tonight's agenda. Item number 1 is an ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as parts of the component codes of the codified ordinances, providing for the adoption of new matter in the updated and revised codified ordinances, publishing the enactment of such new matter, repealing ordinances and resolutions in conflict therewith, and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Council President Astorino. Mr. Astorino, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd like to, just a brief introduction into this. This is a type of document in action that Council takes every year. Throughout the year, when ordinances are passed throughout the year, we then get information from the people that codify our ordinances so that they can bring those big books up to date, and also any other books that the department heads or the police might carry around in their vehicles. As you are aware, you were provided a memo from the law director. In her first paragraph, she talks about, she's writing in regards to the items on the agenda, and her discussion about this item, she indicates that this was not drafted by the law department, and they were not certified by the law department as to correct form. When I introduced this at the June 6th council meeting, I had made mention that it did not have the correctness and form stamp signed by the law department as of yet, but I wanted to at least get the legislation into the committee so that we can do that, and then hopefully in the meantime the law department would take a look at this, because the way the process works from this year, the way that I understand it, is we receive information from our codifier, and we received it in the beginning of March of this year. It indicates to us all the changes that we made, and what happens then is a copy is provided to the law department and a copy is provided to the council clerk. Both of them review it to see if the changes that our codifier, who is American Legal, if they've made the proper changes and identified what we need to change in our codified ordinances. My understanding is that process, it's a rather lengthy process, it has to be accomplished, and it was, from what I understand, was on or about May 30th, we received information from the law department that they've completed their review, and the clerk had already completed her review, so then the clerk forwarded that information to American Legal and said we are prepared to go forward. What happened this year is what happened in previous years. American Legal provides us a draft of an ordinance that is what's been adopted in the past. If you look at it, it's always been provided by American Legal. It does go through. It's supposed to go through the law department, and they're supposed to provide it. That's the process. As far as, you know, so her statement that the ordinances were not drafted by the law department, she's correct. It was drafted by American Legal, as it has been probably for well over 20 years, maybe 30 years. It's certainly, the discussion I had with the clerk, it's been that way since she's been here, and she's been over here for over 20 years. What I did then is, you know, I mean, it's also with the memo came, you can see that the last sentence in her memo on page 2, she says a certified substitute copy of item V1 has been submitted to the clerk of council. That was what was passed out to you just prior to the meeting. I had the clerk made copies of what was submitted by the law department to us. You can see on the third page or the last page of the ordinance, it has the law director's signature that says, I hereby approve the within instrument as to legal form and correctness. That's on the third page of the ordinance, just prior to the exhibit. Does everyone have that?
Before?
It was passed out. May have received it from the clerk just before the meeting. That's why the meeting was delayed by about 5 minutes, because I asked her to make copies. Jimmy, can you show it to her so she sees what it is?
That's all right, here.
You have one with the signature?
Section 7.
You got it, Councilwoman?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll proceed. What I do want to point out to council is that initially I thought, well, the ordinance that was in your packet and provided on Friday would almost mirror what was provided by the law department this afternoon. However, when I first looked at it, when I came here this afternoon to pick up the memo and such, I noticed that, and you can see in the second whereas, that it's marked out there that, you know, it says December 31st, 2014. It's lined through in 2015 because the council clerk contacted the law department and said, there's a mistake here, you've got the wrong year. As it turns out, the mistake is actually even worse than that, because if you, I went back and trying to make sure that when I make a statement that what we were looking to do this year we've done in previous years, I went back and looked at last year's ordinance to see what we did and how we handled it, and it was handled in much the manner that I explained. That the ordinance came from the codifier, it went to the law department, and it was approved to legal form by the law department. It was introduced at a caucus on May 10th of 2016. It had its first reading on May 17th of 2016, and it had its second reading on June 7th of 2016, and that's when it was passed. As the discussion was going on tonight on the police items, I was preparing to look, pulling my documents out and looking at it, and what I want to point out to you now is the document that was provided to you just before the meeting, which is what the law department provided us, is actually a copy of the ordinance that we passed last year. Ordinance number 10,022-2016. This is the same ordinance. So we've already passed the ordinance that the law director provided us tonight, saying this is what we do. So in other words, it's a huge mistake on the part of the law department. They gave us an ordinance that's already been passed. She's saying that the ordinance that we provided in the packet was not, she did not approve it towards legal correctness and form, but what she did approve towards legal correctness and form, or legal form and correctness, What she did is actually an ordinance that we passed last year with her signature on it. So I do not understand, and what I would ask is the law director to explain why she seemed to have a problem with us doing this process in the same manner that we've been doing for well over 20 years. And all of a sudden this year, even though last year we followed that process and she cooperated with it and processed it the same way, but for some reason this year she comes out with a memo this afternoon saying, although it was introduced June 6th, so it sat there for 3 weeks before she said she had a problem with this ordinance, but then what she provides us actually is last year's ordinance, which is, you know, I mean, it's you know, the way I viewed her memo was she was saying that the council clerk and myself were actually providing you wrong information. As it turns out, she's providing the wrong information. So, Mrs. Horvath, if you could explain your mistake to us.
Mr. Council President.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So that's it for. But I would ask that maybe you ask the law director to provide an explanation as to why we were handed last year's ordinance to substitute it.
Thank you. Madam Law Director, would you like to speak on this?
I most definitely would.
Go ahead.
You have a copy of my memo. There has been a process that has been established that the law department drafts legislation and then certifies it. Beginning in 2016, it appears that that process began to erode. There were several resolutions and ordinances that were introduced without the law department's certification, and clearly that's improper. I understand that people want to have their legislation presented, they want to have it done, but this is a procedure that is in the rules and obviously is something that is a confusion or meshing of roles. I mean, it is the legislative branch's job to go ahead and vote, look at legislation. It's the law department's job to draft legislation and certify it. We have had instances where someone has just drafted legislation all on their own and submitted it. For example, last year, Resolution 2-2016, I believe right around August of last year, or perhaps later, we had an instance where legislation was submitted with regard to the fire department and certain fire regulations. That was later defeated due to the fact that it was not only not correct in form, but for other reasons. Most recently, I believe we had ordinance, I can't recall if it's 148 or 149, which involved Me Too clauses and whether or not there were going to be an ordinance that was needed. I had previously on 2 occasions given council memos saying that verbal approval was sufficient. Nonetheless, that ordinance was introduced, put on an agenda, and I believe later disappeared without council moving it from point A to point B. My memo addresses basically items 1 through 5. In item 5 of the agenda tonight. And my point is that this is a process, introducing your own legislation without putting it through the law department. It is something that needs to stop. The rules exist for a reason, and I believe in having legislators just draft their own legislation and submit it to council, contrary to council rule, actually impedes the work of council, contributes to a lot of the problems that we have, and I believe it needs to stop. Now, I could have just gone with this memo and said, okay, I will later submit something with regard to the ordinances. But in an effort to draft 2 memos this morning, deal with some other issues, and also try and get you a copy of an ordinance that would deal with these codified ordinances as soon as possible. We rushed and put this through. If there are any corrections that need to be made, that's fine. The law department will take care of the corrections because that's the law department's job. It is not the function of the legislature or the legislative authority to go ahead and draft legislation and then submit it without the certification of the law department. So this particular ordinance, I will be more than happy to correct and substitute. Obviously, we're talking about this at Caucus. It can be introduced as a new ordinance at our next council meeting. And I will be happy to make whatever corrections that I can. Any mistakes that may be in there were probably made as a result of trying to rush and hurry to accommodate council. And I'm going to reserve the rest of my remarks with regard to items 2 to 5 when those items come up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Law Director. Wow. This is, I guess my next question is, since we're on this topic, is what would you think would be a good turnaround time when a council member asks for a piece of legislation to be drawn up, especially if you're given some whereas isn't a good idea what they want or an example of it? What would you say is a good time frame for having that legislation drawn up and approved?
In a perfect world, I would say under the old 2014-2015 rules, there were 14 days that was designated as a turnaround time. Under your current rules, because you have twice as many meetings as you had previously, the rules, I believe, have that down to 7 days. But it's really only 5 days because Saturday and Sunday, the law department is closed. So 5 days in a perfect world with no controversies, no opinions to write with regard to procedural issues, no issues which the city has had in the past involving litigation concerning council persons or some of the conflicts and controversy that cause extra work, not only for my department, but for other departments, then I would say that 14 days in a perfect world would be very good. Unfortunately, we don't have a perfect world, and often the law department has to make choices as to which particular tasks it has should take priority. For example, should a particular ordinance be worked on, or alternately, due to some situation, should the law department go to a temporary restraining order hearing with regard to the closing of a hotel? Every day there are choices that have to be made and priorities given as to what should be worked on. Another example would be what should take priority. Some of the ordinances that we have on the agenda today, or perhaps we should look at amending the DUI ordinance that the state has amended and have our city conform to the state's standards. Or alternately, perhaps some of the building code provisions should be amended. So it's not simply looking at what is presented as a request for legislation from council. It's also other departments that have issues. And I would point out that this particular council obviously has had some issues, certainly has had its minutes backed up, and at this point in time also has someone who is in the process of investigating council administration. And a great deal of those issues have run downhill and caused a tremendous lot of work for the law department. Law department has also spent a lot of time advising council with regard to the appointment of a new council member. I think there was, I didn't even add up the hours of meetings that, you know, I did not attend, but sat across the street and watched the meeting. So to answer your question, I think that council has to realize that there are many demands upon the law department, and we do our very best to balance those demands. And that doesn't mean that rules shouldn't be followed. That doesn't mean that because you perhaps feel that you would like to have legislation sooner, that the requirement that the law department certify the legislation be canceled. And last year, the amount and requests for ordinances and resolutions more than doubled, along with the attendance time for meetings. I think we're probably on track for that also. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, probably to me, but not possibly not to others. I'd like to. So on this, let's get it back closer to this topic right here. On this piece of legislation that was generally, as the council president said, drawn up by our American Publishing, American Legal. I mean, that's how it's been done. I mean, is there? So what you're telling me is really the law department doesn't have time to rewrite stuff when it's been good. This version of it's been good. I don't understand why you couldn't have just signed off on this as it's written. Did you find any specific problems with it? That while this piece, as it's been written for years, didn't work, and yeah, I'll let you go ahead and.
All right, I believe there's an addition in section 7, beginning with therefore, provided this ordinance receives the affirmative vote of at least 5 members elected to council, it shall take effect and be in force immediately upon its passage. I believe that's a new addition.
Okay, so you couldn't have just added that and had somebody, one of your clerks add that?
I believe that's what was done.
Approve it? No, what you did is copied last year's and sent it out as this year's. That's what it appears to me.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm holding it right in front of me. So, I mean, I just, I'm not sitting here all happy about this. We also mentioned before that the law department, if you need help, that we should appropriate some more money for the law department and get some extra clerks in there and get you the help you need so we can get these things done. I, for one, have been waiting over almost 18 months for some legislation I asked for in January of 16, and we talked about it a few times and still don't have anything. So go ahead, Mr. Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, it's clear to me that the resolution to this is just to send over the ordinance that's been presented by the council president that was suggested from American Legal Publishing. Also send over what American Legal Publishing has sent to the council president, along with the substitute piece, send it back to the law director and have the law director fine tune it and get it ready for next Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And I would like to put that in the form of a motion.
Okay, what was that again?
Send this back to the law department and make the necessary changes and corrections for the next council meeting.
The one that's on the agenda?
After the corrections are made and the fresh piece of legislation comes back, yes.
Okay, not the one that was handed to us tonight, the one that was on the agenda.
I want it to be put in the proper form and give the law director the opportunity to have her staff go over this and put it in the proper form, make any necessary changes and corrections that are needed, and have it ready for the next council meeting.
Do I have a second for that?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion made.
Discussion?
Okay, properly seconded. Mr. Esserino, go ahead.
Under discussion on that motion, I would like to point out that the item that was in your packet, that was on the agenda, was not drafted by any legislator, as the law director was trying to infer actually made a comment saying that it was drafted by the legislator. It was drafted by American Legal, as it has been. Our codifier is always the one that drafts that legislation. The problem that occurred here is rather than follow the procedure that's been followed for over 20-some years, the law director decided to stray from the procedure this year and not do it that way. She didn't explain why she decided to do that, but then she also presented to council tonight a document saying, this is what I want you to substitute for it, to replace that document. And guess what? We've already passed that ordinance last year. You know, if the law department is so overworked, although at council meetings she reports that they have one case or two cases of stuff, if they're so overworked that they can't provide the council with this document, her explanation then doesn't actually get to why she made this huge mistake. It gets into items about, well, you guys are under investigation, there's minutes that need to be done.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
She starts distracting.
It's not speaking to the amendment.
My
point of order. He's not speaking to the amendment.
I will change my discussion on the amendment then, and I will say simply that the way I view this amendment is it's pretty much just trying to gloss over a mistake that was drastically made by the law department, simply to say, well, let's just have her redo it again when she had 3 weeks to do it in the first place.
Mr. Chairman.
So, thank you.
Come on.
Mr. Chairman, may I comment?
Council, I'd just like to say, just remember this is amazing
personal.
That we
is what it's being. It's personal.
This is a should be a housekeeping item.
Mr. Chairman.
It is a housekeeping item.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
We used to do council first. Mr. Salvador, do you want to speak first, or?
Yeah, you said it should be a house cleaning. It is a house cleaning item. I mean, did this legislation go over from council to the law department with the recommendations from American Legal Publishing? Did that happen? And did you not hear what the law director said, that the recommendation from American Legal Publishing did not have Section 7? That I don't see a Section 7. At least it's not in mine.
Well, if you read it, it means the same thing. It's just our wording of it.
I understand.
Yes, a section was added, but if 6 and 7 mean the same thing in both.
So there's a motion on the floor to correct a house cleaning item. I don't think there's any reason to have any more discussion unless you're just trying to do it. I mean, this is not, again, this is just a simple item, Mr. Chairman, to correct something that may not be proper, not be in the proper form, and give the opportunity for the law director to fix it and bring it back to council, and we can pass a house cleaning item at the next council meeting.
Okay, but I have to go to law director because I'm not going to deny her when she got her hand up like that. Go ahead, Madam Law Director.
I also wanted to comment when you have the opportunity. You said when council was done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to point out that I did not say that this particular piece of legislation was drafted by a member of this body. What I said is that the law department did not draft it, and that's an entirely different issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, can we call the roll, or do I have to go to you?
No, I would like.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I would like to comment, if I may. Okay, the fact is our procedures require that anything drafted by anyone be submitted to the law department prior to council's consideration. That has been in effect for over the 34 years that I've been without exception. Okay, and finally, let me say this, because you allowed this to be said in the record of a criticism of an operation of a city department for a person who operates a 1.5 person office that has never failed to the degrees it has legislatively in the history of the city. To try to suggest that the law director is not doing her job properly is it's criminal and ludicrous. So I was out of order, but I wanted to say it anyway.
I do agree his comment is ludicrous.
Okay,
your comment was ludicrous.
Gentlemen, easy.
Call the roll, Mr. Chairman.
Clerk, any more discussion from the council people? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Salvatore?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Powers?
Yes.
Troyer?
Yes.
Mancini?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
motion carried. The amendment will be passed over to the law department.
Okay. Council,
Corrections, not amendments.
council, at this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to take a 10-minute recess.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we'll take a 10-minute recess.
Where is this going?
Is you gonna call the roll, Mr. Chairman?
We call the roll.
It takes a vote. Requires a vote, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Salvatore.
Like it, yes.
Okay.
Let's go.
Any
Anxious.
any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll. on
Who made the motion
a
for
10-minute
recess?
recess?
Councilman, who seconded?
I did.
Okay.
Mancini,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
Salvatore,
No.
Bergio,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
you voted no, it's 6-1. Motion carried. Bring us back.
Okay, am I ready, council? All right, the council president needs to make an announcement, so I'm gonna go back to the council president for a moment. Go ahead,
Okay.
council
We're back in
president.
order?
Yeah, you know, the recess is completed. We're back to the regular meeting.
Okay.
What I'd like to announce is, I was just informed that a long-standing Recreation Commission member passed away last night, I think it was.
Yes.
He was very active. It was Rich Kostranik. So he passed away. So what I would actually like to do is ask everyone to take a pause and give a moment of silence for Rick. Okay, thank you. Chairman, we'll go back to the regular business now.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Okay. We're on item
Chairman,
number
Mr.
2.
Chairman,
Okay,
if you could,
go ahead, Madam.
We did amendments to the legislation for the codified. Where's it going next? I need a motion as to where it's going, the next caucus, the next council. Where am I putting it after the amendment, after the corrections are made?
Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to place it on the next caucus meeting.
Motion for put it on the next caucus.
Are you
Yes.
talking about the one we already took care of? It's gonna be ready for the next council meeting.
Yeah.
That impression
We
too.
don't have okay, that's fine. My opinion is we don't have a piece of legislation yet, so, because it's gonna be,
the clerk's question was simply once it's going back to the law department to be clarified and corrected and everything, where is it going next? She didn't catch that, if it was part of the motion or not.
okay,
Should
so,
we introduce it to
so
council
not
meeting?
getting a motion or a second, council, what's your pleasure?
It was in the motion, and it was supported, it was already voted on.
Do you have that or no?
For corrections?
Yeah, that's correct.
For corrections and then.
There was a motion made for it to go to law
Director,
department.
And then,
For the
Corrections made and resubmitted for the next council meeting. That's what I understood it to be.
What I heard too.
Oh, I didn't hear next council meeting.
That's what I heard.
Is that what the motion was?
That's
I
what the
believe
motion
that's
was.
correct.
Okay, I didn't hear that.
Is that what
Sorry.
you heard?
I did hear corrections. Now, who made the motion to go to council?
It was all in the same motion.
Okay.
All right. Sorry.
Should we?
Thank you for the clarification,
Okay.
council.
Okay, item number 2 of the 6 items in legislative committee tonight. An ordinance amending certain section 153.01A5 of the Brook Park Codified Ordinances entitled Vacations and declaring an emergency, introduced by Council President Astorino. Council President Astorino, would you like to speak on this?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to give a brief overview of the change that I'm looking to make, that's being proposed by this ordinance. Currently, the section reads, for the purpose of accumulating vacation leave credit, a city employee's anniversary date of employment shall be the anniversary date of such employee's prior service with the state or any political subdivision thereof. The amendment that I'm looking to, I'm proposing is to add the words afterwards. It would say, for the purpose of accumulating vacation leave credit, a city employee's anniversary date of employment shall be the anniversary date of such employee's prior service with the state or any political subdivision thereof where the employee has not exercised any type of cash out or retirement. The purpose of the change is that it's my feeling that if we bring on an employee who has actually served some other public agency, provided, you know, maybe for an example, they work 30 years at City B and then pensioned out, and then they come here to work for the City of Brook Park, that they should be treated as a new employee. It's my understanding that this was reported in November of last year, when the assistant finance director was talking about certain things. He explained that increases were due to the extra week's vacation, and it was at that point we found some of the directors were actually getting 5 weeks of vacation, even though they've only been here for, at that time, for 3 years. I questioned the finance director how that happened, because when the assistant finance director reported it, he mentioned a legal opinion that was rendered by the previous law director. The discussion I had with the finance director about it was, as it turned out, it was a verbal opinion interpretation of the ordinance that was provided to the finance director. The finance director communicated to me that although he didn't agree with the interpretation, the vacation time credit is being calculated pursuant to the former law director's interpretation, which would be that their anniversary date would be from when they were hired with their previous employer. I had a problem with that because I think it's a rather generous provision that's being given, and actually, as you know from the memo that was provided to you this afternoon, there was a legal opinion that was provided by one of the attorneys from our Walter Haverfield, the labor attorney, and in that opinion, if you want to look at it, on page 3, under section A, the bolded and underlined section says the city may exclude calculation of prior service credit in determining employment benefits for an employee who retired from public service pursuant to a retirement plan of the state. And then as you go further down that paragraph and you see this, they cited section 9.44C of the Ohio Revised Code, and it reads, an employee who has retired in accordance with the provisions of any retirement plan offered by the state and who is employed by the state or any political subdivision of the state on or after June 24th, 1987, shall not have prior service with the state, any political subdivision of the state, or a regional council of government established in accordance with Chapter 167 of the Revised Code counted for the purpose of computing vacation leave. And it says, an emphasis added, because the part that said, and who is employed by the state or any political subdivision of the state on or after June 24th, 1987 was in bold. I'm not sure where the previous law director came up with the determination that we would have to go back to their anniversary date when this section of the Revised Code actually says that that employee shall not have his or her prior service with the state or any other public agency counted for the purpose of computing vacation leave. And what I am looking to do is simply to revise the ordinance that currently has that to reflect what the state law says, that would prohibit an employee who works somewhere else for 30 years, retires, and then comes here to work in another position, and then is provided a generous, he or she would be provided with the maximum vacation leave. I think they should be treated as a new employee and start all over again because they've already pensioned out. That's the purpose of the legislation. I would like to point out that it's been quite a journey for me to get to this point because I submitted this to the law department on February 28th of this year, and it took a memo from the law department saying that they were going to seek some legal advice from the labor attorney. I waited for that. We got the response on March 20th. I met with the law director to go over that. I explained that a couple of things in their interpretation actually didn't reflect what I was looking to change. I thought that the attorney from Walter Haverfield misunderstood what I was looking to do. And so I sent several email requests for the copies of the legislation. I was provided a copy. This is not legislation that was drafted by the legislator. This is legislation before you was actually drafted by the law department. All I sent to them was copies of what the current language was and what my proposed amendment was, and then copies of the legislation was drafted by the law department, and that's what we went over with at the meeting that I had with the law department. She provided me draft copies of legislation to be looked at. The way I view it is by putting it in a committee and dealing with it here at a caucus, it's like Councilman Mancini said at the very beginning, isn't this supposed to be a work session? I'm proposing a change that I think would be beneficial to this community, that we don't incur liabilities that other cities would be burdening this city with. If your employment was with another city and you come here, you're entitled to certain benefits, but I don't think we should be treating you and paying you for service that you had there. So this piece of legislation was proper. I think is properly before you, simply because although it does not have, again, the law director's signature approving it, the written instrument as to legal form and correctness, it's because she seems to simply refuse to do that for me. She's been asked to do this repeatedly.
Mr. Chairman,
in fact,
point of order, Mr. Chairman. Okay, we seem to have
Mayor, what's your point?
My point of order is we're not speaking to the legislation. It's a continuing assault on the law department. And what the memorandum for Mr. Hunt says is clear. We may do this. I would like to speak to why the administration thinks this is a benefit to the city. We've had an ongoing attack by this council president for the 2 years he's been here against administrative employees.
Point of order. Okay.
Now it seems to go. Now it seems to go to the law director.
Stop,
I'm calling a point of order.
Good. He's right. It's a point of order. I'm out of order.
So, but yet you continue. Okay.
I continue because
let me go to the law director.
Let him do it.
Let me go to the law director.
Ma'am, please. We have a meeting. We have a meeting going on. We're not supposed to have any audience.
Please do not be disorderly. Let us continue the meeting. Please let us continue the meeting.
You're supposed to be professional too.
Okay, Madam Law Director, what do we need to do or change on this piece of legislation to get it approved as the legal form by your department?
I'm going to take that as a two-part question, all right? My memo indicates that according to Mr. Hunt of Walter Haverfield, that this amendment can only apply to prospective employees. That means ones that we hire at a later date. We cannot in midstream change what we have for current employees. And in my opinion, this particular draft does exactly that. Now there have been drafts
Real
for...
quick, does which one? I missed that.
It would apply to current employees.
Jimmy, please.
I had to ask. Go ahead.
That's fine.
I want to be informed. Yeah. Okay, so thank you.
You have to go through the chair. You know.
Now, there may have been legislation that was drafted for discussion purposes, but it was never finalized. And the law department, when I say it did not draft this, I'm saying it was not completed and sent over to the council office. I'm particularly disturbed because this piece of legislation has a stamp, a purported stamp on it, which is not the law department's stamp. I don't know how that got there. I can only assume that the draft legislation that was completed for discussion purposes somehow was introduced with something that purports to be the law department's stamp, but it's patently clear from looking at this piece of legislation that is not the law department's stamp.
Mr. Chairman, point of clarification, real quick, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Mancini.
Thank you. So, Madam Law Director, if I'm looking at what I'm looking at, you're saying this right here, okay, this wasn't done by the law department is what you're saying?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. You may go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm also saying, Councilman Mancini, that we did not complete the draft of this particular legislation and send it over to the council office. Had we completed the draft of it, then we would have stamped it as to form and content, and I would have signed it. But it appeared, well, you'll even see in this particular piece, I think there's some misspellings. You know, you look at Director of Law underneath the line, that's clearly not spelled correctly. It's clearly not the law department's stamp. Now, my opinion would be, I feel this piece of legislation, along with the others, should be killed. Because number one, the law department, while it had inter-office drafts of this particular piece of legislation, it was never sent over to council. There appears to be some sort of stamp, which is not the law department's stamp. And further, it is not correct. It is defective because it would apply to current employees, and it should only apply prospectively. And for those reasons, I would suggest to council that this particular piece be killed, and we'll restart with a new piece because there are too many problems with it and too many issues.
Okay, thank you for your opinion, Madam Law Director, but remember, we have 7 voting members of council here, and that's our decision, and you're really supposed to give us a basic opinion and not direct council how to vote. Now, my question to you is, what do we have to do to fix this? You're saying
You have a forgery, sir.
you're saying
You have a forgery. How do you fix that?
There is no forgery.
Yes, there sure is.
I don't know that there's a forgery.
Out
Out of order, Mayor. You're not professional, Mayor.
All right, everybody, easy.
Who affixed the stamp to it, Mr. President?
The law department.
They did? When? Is this the same stamp that you have on the sign piece? I think not. Council, examine it. The question is, how did this get here?
Mr. Chair, can I speak to the ordinance?
Go ahead, Mr. Esserado, since they're
Okay. We will go to the memo from the law department that's talking about this being defective. Once again, if you look at the memo that she provided this afternoon, if you look at paragraph 3 of her memo, which she says with regard to item V2, which is the amendment of section 153.01A5 of Brook Park Codified Ordinances, the provisions of this proposed amendment are defective as drafted due to conflicts with Brook Park Ordinances 131.01E, and further does not exclude current sitting elected officials from its terms. The only part of that paragraph that's actually correct is the last sentence that says this amendment can only apply to prospective employees, because there's nothing in this ordinance that deals with the elected officials or current elected officials. So it appears to me that this memo was written with that paragraph so intent on finding things defective that she's making up false facts.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. There is nothing. This ordinance has nothing to do with Ordinance 131.01E. It has to do with the employees that are non-contractual employees. 131.01 deals with an elected official. This ordinance does not address that, and yet she's telling council that it is defective because it can't pertain to elected officials when it isn't proposed to pertain to
Mr. Chairman, it's defective because
Thank you, Mr.
the
Council
instrument
President.
has
Mr.
not been
Scott,
approved.
go ahead.
And you need to address that.
Mayor,
read
please.
It says it's defective
Hey,
as
let's
drafted
read this.
due to conflicts
Please.
with Brook Park Codified Ordinance.
Let's read this.
You
only read
memo.
Let's hear
I'm
from
addressing paragraph
That's
3 of her
correct.
memo.
Let's hear from the voting members of council,
Let's address
please.
how the stamp got on there, and that's why we have the problem.
Mr. Scott,
Your
go ahead.
rules preclude this from being considered.
Mayor, please.
Unless it's, I'm going to add, point of
You
order.
don't have the floor.
Do your rules preclude legislation from being considered
Point of order.
before it is
Point
reviewed?
of order can't
I'm
be a
asking a
question.
point of
He has-
order.
you
Listen,
can't ask a
who
question.
forged this stamp? That's the issue. Because it can't be before you without certification from the law department, and you know it, and you're avoiding the fact. This guy thinks he's the law director.
Mr. Chairman, run your meeting. Go.
I'm trying here. Thank you, Mayor.
Question.
Mr. Scott, go ahead.
I got three real quick questions. Madam Law Clerk, is this your stamp?
No.
Did you place that stamp on that piece of legislation?
No.
Madam Clerk, is this your stamp?
No.
Did you place that stamp on this piece of legislation?
No.
Council President Astorino, is this your stamp?
No.
Did you place this on this piece of legislation?
No.
How did this get on here?
Okay, anybody else with any questions or comments?
I wasn't done. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr.
Okay,
Scott.
this is illegal, okay? Now, we've got a stamp on here who nobody claims to. How did it get here? Bottom line, how did it get here? If this is supposed to be legal, how did this get here? She didn't do it, Madam Clerk didn't do it, and Council President didn't do it. Who did it?
Don't know.
Well, then throw this thing down, flush this one down the toilet too. This is illegal. I'm sorry.
So
I'm done. Thank you.
So we're gonna flush this down the toilet and then bring up and try to get another piece, start all over.
Make it legal.
Okay. Madam Law Director, can Law Department do that?
Good luck.
Here is what I would propose.
What?
Point of order. Was that necessary, sir? That
Yes,
comment?
it is. Yes, it is.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Please, everyone, please. Madam Law Director, go ahead.
I would send these 4 pieces to Mr. Hunt and ask him to complete them. I think that would be best. I certainly reviewed his opinion and pointed out to you the defects that were contained in each one of these drafts. I believe these defects were discussed in my meeting with Mr. Astorino. There were drafts that we looked over, but there never was anything final that was sent over to council. If I can further speak,
Go ahead. Everyone,
due
please.
to the situation that we had last November, every time a piece of legislation is taken over to council, the first page of that legislation is stamped by the council clerk. That has been our procedure since about November 22nd of 2016, and I should have a copy of this piece of legislation stamped on the first page with the date it was presented, if it was sent over by the law department. Now, my understanding, and I will do some further checking and report back to council, but this is a duty that my administrative assistant has undertaken ever since we had the first problem with the altered legislation in November. It's her job to keep all of the proposed legislation in a book, and I believe that each and every piece since that date, if she presents it to council, at least the first page, and sometimes we have had other pages stamped so that we can keep track of whether something is presented, and we can also make sure that what we presented is in fact what council has. And we can certainly ask the clerk to confirm if that has not been our procedure. So I will go tomorrow, first thing, and ask my administrative assistant to look through the book. But I'm pretty sure that these 4 pieces will not be present in that book, and there will be no stamps on the first page of these pieces. That's because they were never presented to council, and the stamp that appears on each of these 4 pieces is not the stamp of the law department. The stamp of the law department stays in the law department. It's in Kate's desk drawer, and it doesn't go anywhere. And we're very careful about locking the office door when we leave. So I'm very concerned about all 4 of these pieces. They were not presented by the law department. The stamp on each one of them isn't the law department stamp. You will notice as you look at them that they all vary. They're not all the same. And I see, based on Mr. Hunt's report, that there are problems with each one of these pieces because they were never completed. And my proposal would be let Mr. Hunt complete them. But unfortunately, I think all of these pieces are defective, if for no other reason, because 1, the law department did not finalize its preparation. Number 2, the law department did not certify that they were correct as a form and content. And also there's issues, according to Mr. Hunt's opinion, with each of the pieces. That's why I provided you with Mr. Hunt's report, so you can look through it and see it.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman, real quick, if I may.
quickly.
Just to
Mr.
be
Mancini.
on the safe side here. Madam Law Director, I believe, at least on mine, that 3 of them are stamped. I don't think there's one on an ordinance amending certain section of 153.02A of the Brook Pike Codified Ordinances entitled Sick Leave and Declare an Emergency. That would, am I number 3?
It's on the side, Jim.
Okay. All right, I got it. It's not where it should be, so.
If I may, Councilman Mancini, sometimes we do have to stamp on the side if necessary. But I cannot recall a time where we have ever stamped on the side and not gotten that line and Director of Law underneath. My assistant's been doing this for a real long time. She's really good at squeezing that stamp in. And if that was the Law Department stamp, you definitely have a line and Director of Law underneath.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Law Director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, continue, Madam Law Director. My interest is in getting good legislation passed. So my interest right now is not in trying to attack or laying blame on everybody. I'm sure that'll be done later on anybody. I think these pieces of legislation are on the right track, and I think they're good pieces, and they should be passed in some form. So can you don't think these are in this form as they're presented here, we can reconcile these and fix these? You think we should start over?
I don't think they can be reconciled. I personally would not sign off on any 4 of them. You know, council, I suppose, could decide they want to pass it, but I certainly wouldn't recommend that.
Okay.
And I think it would be appropriate to,
okay,
you know, dispose of all of them.
So my question is, can and will the Law Department basically take what's written here and then submit it to Mr. Hunt, as you said you could do, but obviously not saying these particular ones that have been introduced, but a like form, and submit it to Mr. Hunt. Can the Law Department do that in a timely way and get it back to council?
Well, certainly.
Okay, what kind of time frame do you think that could happen?
Well, don't you think that depends on Mr. Hunt's schedule as much as it does mine?
Yes, and but
another 4 months.
If that's what Mr. Hunt deems necessary, I would say yes.
Okay, well now can we send it to somebody else that can get it back to us sooner?
I think you'll be fine with Mr. Hunt.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Rachel, go ahead. You wanted to speak before?
No, I'd appreciate everyone remembering, respect. I'm thinking about what I want to say before I say it. I actually think that in this particular case, having that third-party person would be very beneficial to make sure. I agree, there's a lot of good information that we really do need to discuss, but I don't think that without that third person creating it, we're going to have a discussion. So can we put a motion just to get that going?
Okay. Okay, so what the law director is asking is that what I'm gathering is you want to kill this, and I'm asking that the law department contacts Mr. Hunt and get these done. And
it's my understanding. Can I jump in?
Go ahead.
It's my understanding that there already has. This isn't the particular information that the 2 people worked on, correct? There's another copy of a draft somewhere. Yes.
If I may, there probably is a draft in the computer in the law department.
Could that draft be used to be looked at the third person?
I can certainly forward those drafts to Mr. Hunt.
Because those drafts, you saw that draft too. That's what you got. That's what you were talking about when you both were talking about this legislation information. The draft. Oh, sorry. Through chair too.
Well, I don't know anything about draft. This is what I know. So, but if I could ask if you want to give the Give the council president a chance. I'll let him go ahead. Go ahead, council president.
If I may finish answering the question.
Certainly, go ahead.
Okay. Go ahead.
I don't think that you need a motion. I don't think that the cost of sending it to Mr. Hunt will be exorbitant, and I'll certainly have the law department get that out as soon as possible. You may, of course, do a motion if you wish, but I think he probably has some sort of account set up already with the city.
Okay.
Go ahead, President Astorino.
If I could ask, if it does go to Mr. Hunt, that if you're going to make a motion to do that, which is what I would ask you to do, because what I would like is for council to actually allow myself to communicate with Mr. Hunt too. Because when I had the meeting with the law director and I expressed how I didn't think his opinion was reflective of what my proposal was, she said she was going to contact him and address that. Apparently that didn't happen, because my meeting happened at the end of March with her, and it never got addressed. So the only way that, as the drafter, as the proposer here of this legislation, that I could be assured that my concerns and my proposal is actually addressed is for me to talk to Mr. Hunt also.
Could you put your questions in writing and have it forwarded to Mr. Hunt, and he could send an email?
Well, what I would ask is, I would ask if council is willing to do that in the motion, because what I would be worried about, to be honest with you, is the communication will either go through the law department or it will go through the mayor's office, and it won't be reflective of necessarily my questions and my concerns. I think if the labor attorney is going to be involved in this legislation, then I think I would need to have some sort of communications directly with the labor attorney, so that. So
I guess I'm missing some. Couldn't you just send an email and CC the rest of council with everyone present? Because I'm sure all of us, and I'm speaking for all of you, I'm sorry, have a great deal of interest in this situation, and I would like to be CC'd and read everything myself. So. Okay, well,
Rachel, generally when somebody requests legislation, they request it to the law department.
Right.
And the council doesn't know about it at that time.
Okay.
So it goes to the law department draws it up, approves it, then it comes to council.
Okay.
You know, then it comes back to the council office.
Got it. And
then at that time, you some are aware if you're paying attention, but still a lot of times council isn't aware until it's introduced.
Okay.
So it doesn't. Normally it doesn't follow that way, and I don't think it, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be that way this time where we do follow it, but you know that generally the person who's introducing it, which would still be Council President Astorino, that he would move it through the legal department and who's ever doing that.
Completely understand that, but this is a completely different situation because we have stamps, right, that don't look appropriate, and a lot of people are. I'm trying
to get away from that's the topic for another day. I'm trying.
Oh, it is the topic.
Right. So right now, I'm trying to get this.
Mr. Chairman,
4 good pieces of legislation, you know, to move forward. That's what I'm trying to do right now.
So
if there's other issues, that's for
So could we have him email his concerns and all of us be CC'd on it so that we would all be guaranteed that it's fair communication?
I don't see any problem with that, I guess.
Okay.
But I think what he wants to do is be able to verbally convey his ideas to this gentleman and have it written that way instead of having somebody write it and then say, no, that's not what I was looking for. You know. So and it is his piece.
Yeah, so, I understand that.
Because remember, the idea is to kill this. According to the law director, wants to kill these 4 pieces, so that nothing's going to exist. So what we want to do is and there's good points in these 4 pieces.
Which I agree.
Just have the law department draw something up.
No, there's not.
So, oh my God. All right. Law director, go ahead.
I would suggest that whatever questions that anyone has with regard to this be forwarded to the law department so that we could forward it to Mr. Hunt. I think that would be the appropriate method. I'm also, I mean, obviously, I wouldn't consider him a labor attorney. I would consider him a municipal law attorney. He has been law director for a number of cities throughout the past 20 or more years. So I certainly value his opinion, but I don't think it's fair to him to be bombarded with a bunch of outside emails. I think it's best if they are funneled directly to him from the law department. And then I would say that Mr. Troyer is correct. Usually when someone has legislation, I'll call them in and show them a draft. And they may even take that draft with them of the legislation, but I do not discuss it with any other council members. And so I guess I would ask Council President Astorino if that was the case, if he took the draft of the legislation we discussed with him after our discussion.
Okay. Mr. Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to remove items 2 through 5 off the agenda until they are properly approved by the law department.
I don't, Mr. Salvatore, I don't think that's what the law director wanted.
On the contrary, that is proper. Your rules still say that the law department has to certify the legislation. We're asking another expert's help in drafting it, but he is not to certify it. The law director of the city of Brook Park is supposed to certify it. So Mr. Salvatore is correct.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that's not what you were saying. You're saying that that we would have to start over, and these would be, you wanted these to die a fast death.
Right. I'm talking about future drafts, not this particular draft.
Okay. Clerk. Go, Mr. Council President, go ahead.
I would ask, as a sponsor of the legislation, I would be okay with item number 4 just being read in committee and removed from our agenda. I would ask that items 2, 3, and 5 just be placed back in committee for it to be, because I think the legislation, from what I read of his opinion, that with a few small amendments to the legislation, it could be done, and it could get past what she thinks is defective of it. Okay. You know, there's a few small amendments, which is what my thought process was when we come to a caucus. Is the legislation just starts? If changes need to be made, we can make them in caucus. It doesn't seem reasonable to me to sit there and say, well, I don't like the way it's drafted right now. It could be changed a little bit. Let's just kill it and start all over. Those 3 pieces of legislation, I think, are valid. I think the with a couple of amendments to it, it can get past the fact of it being prospective employees. As I said, number 5 there dealt. I know his objection to it was not addressed by him, because his objection to it had nothing to do with what my legislation was. So if he had suggestions on an amendment to get past his concern was he thought I was discriminating against from the type of service, when it's no, anyone that comes from any public agency would be handled that way. It wasn't to be meant that. I tried to convey that to the law department. Apparently it never got to Mr. Hunt for clarification. But item number 4 does deal with elected officials. We are past the stage of being able to change it for their term anyway. So that one could be, as far as I'm concerned, we can't go forward with that one anyway. But items 2, 3, and 5, I think, with a couple small amendments, would be valid legislation to come before council. And I would hate to think that the law department is going to stop me from actually proposing legislation simply because they don't like 1 or 2 points that could be amended. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Madam Law Director, is it agreeable to you to put 2, 3, and 4 back in committee?
2, 3, and 5.
Absolutely not. And I told you earlier that I would not sign as to correctness in form. I will not certify any of those pieces.
Okay, and that's what I said 5 minutes ago. And when Mr. Salvatore, what was your motion?
To remove them from the agenda.
Okay. And where are they going?
Wherever you want to put them.
They'd be back in committee. Just removed from tonight's agenda. They'd
Okay,
still be in
we have to put them somewhere. We can't
No,
just.
they'd still be in, they'd be put back in committee, because if they're removed from the agenda, they would be.
Mr. Chairman,
Question.
Go ahead, Mr. Scott.
This it's illegally stamped. This isn't legal legislation. It has an illegal stamp on it.
Mr. Scott, please quit beating that dead horse.
I'm not beating a dead horse, sir. This is
it's the most
illegal
important
legislation.
fact there
We're
is.
talking about trying to get legislation passed.
The draft new
Yes,
stuff.
if it's legal, yes, I would go ahead and put it on the
So-
next council
so
agenda,
we have-
whatever.
Point
but
of
it's
order.
not legal.
Point of
We-
order,
we-
Mr. Chairman.
What's your point?
My point is, illegally stamped is not just it's not a moot point. We've
Who
been
has
down that
proof
road
it was
before.
illegally stamped?
We just had three
Okay,
people.
fine.
Who would have did it?
We have a motion to remove from the agenda items. Let's take items 2, 3, and 4 from the agenda. We have a motion to remove them from the agenda.
Support.
Okay.
2, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, removed 2, 3, 4, and 5 from the agenda. Who
Support.
support? Okay.
Where are they going?
Motion to remove 2, 3, 4, and 5 from the agenda made by Councilman Salvatore, properly seconded by Councilman Bergio. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, clerk, please.
Yeah, I got a question.
Sorry, I got a question, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Rachel.
So if we put it back into committee, then how do we resolve getting it to be a good piece of legislation?
It's got to be rewritten.
Are we,
My suggestion would be I would communicate with the law department in written form, copy all of council on what I think the amendments need to be made. Hopefully, she would forward it to Mr. Todd Hunt, and then we would get a response back on it.
Mr. Chairman, do I get an opportunity to speak here at some point?
On the motion, Mayor.
Well, it is on the motion.
Okay.
Because the fact is that the council president had in fact Mr. Hunt's opinion for some time. Council has defeated this form of legislation in some form over the last several months, several times. Mr. Hunt is retained by the administration, so all communications would either go through me and the law director. Yeah. I think this legislation that should be defeated this evening, which is illegal and improper. Mr. Astorino's drafts can be sent to Mr. Hunt to look at it, but these are not good pieces of legislation at all, so that statement is not correct. The administration is the one that has to get potential employees. So this isn't about fairness at all, so make sure that any of these pieces of legislation, as they are tonight, that apparently reflects his opinion, would be vetoed by the administration. So it's not a good piece of legislation, so having said all that. So council, once again, should defeat this legislation.
I agree.
Okay. Thanks for the instructions, Mayor.
That's not instructions.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a motion to
Chairman, please. They're not
to take these off.
I made my point.
You don't have the floor,
and
Mayor.
Mayor,
you don't have the floor.
Mayor, you're out of order.
I try to be most of the time with this group.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
In direct conflict with rule number 9, I would point out council rules.
Let me tell you something.
Those rules don't apply to him.
What's your rule on the stamp, Mr. President? You're a hypocrite.
No, the rule on the stamp is
Point of order. Point of order, Mayor. You want everybody else to be respectful.
Hold on, Mrs. Powers. He's asking me a question. I will answer his question.
Thank you.
I left the law department with a draft copy of the legislation.
Where did the stamp come from on the legislation?
So for the law director to tell this council, once again, she's telling this council something that is not accurate.
Are you trying to? Okay, let's clarify this.
Let's look at.
Can we do this right now?
I have my copy.
Gentlemen, we have a motion. Please.
I have my copy from April 7th.
Please.
That I got from the law department, and it had her stamp on it.
This is the law director's stamp. Are you telling me that? You know better than that, sir.
Do you comprehend what I said?
I'm asking you. I want you to look at this.
I walked out of the office on April 7th.
Is this the law department stamp, sir? The law that's not even properly read and printed on this thing. Okay, I'm asking you a question. Are you telling me?
I'm telling you that stamp there was put by the law department.
This stamp right here? This stamp right here?
The stamp that is
I'd
on.
like to entertain a motion to take a 10-minute recess.
Call the question. I'm going to call the question.
Law department.
Mr. Chairman, I'm calling the question.
Needs a second.
I don't know what
Get a second on the question?
Second.
There we go.
It's not
No
debatable.
debate.
It needs 2/3 vote.
Okay, we have a motion. Let me try to remember what it was.
No, no, the motion before you is to call for the question,
Right.
which ends
All right,
debate and
gotcha.
then goes to the roll
Okay.
call if it gets 2/3 vote.
Okay, the motion to call a question, there's no discussion on that. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mancini?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Powers?
Yes.
What?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Troyer?
Yes.
Salvatore?
Yes.
Bergio?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Okay, the question, the motion is to place items to remove items 2, 3, and 4, 2, 3, 4, and 5 from the agenda, tonight's agenda. That is the motion. Clerk, please call the roll.
Salvatore?
Yes.
Bergio?
Yes.
Scott?
No.
Mancini?
Yes.
McDonald?
No.
Powers?
Yes.
Troyer?
Yes.
5-2.
Okay, items 2, 3, 4, and 5 have been removed from the agenda. Moving on to item 6 in the Legislative Committee. Item 6 is a resolution designating June 1st, 2017 as the annual appreciation day for Brook Park service workers in the city of Brook Park and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilman Salvatore. Mr. Salvatore, what would you like to say on this?
I think the resolution speaks for itself. It's following suit for all the other resolutions that have been introduced, honoring our other departments, and this is nothing different than that. I'd like to recognize our service department for the fine work that they've been doing throughout the year and throughout the years in plural.
And Mr. Salvatore, you can co-sponsors on this?
I'd rather not have you on it. No, I'm only kidding. That's a joke. Of course, but I always have co-sponsors on
There's
it.
always some truth.
Yeah.
Okay, so anybody who does not want to sponsor this piece of legislation, this resolution, seeing nobody, it'd be council as a whole. Mr. Salvatore, you have anything else?
Yeah, we're gonna have to change the date
Okay,
in the title from June 1st.
okay.
And maybe put it somewhere on the final week of July, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Any recommendations or suggestions?
24 through 28.
What about what date? About, you want a day, certain day, or?
Oh, let's see, how about the last Friday in July?
28th?
It won't go to the council, it won't be able to be passed until, we could pass it on the 18th if we put it on the council.
Correct.
So sometime after the 18th.
We can actually pass this in July.
That's what I said.
Okay, that's right, never mind. I was off a month. Okay, go ahead.
18th of July, so anytime after that.
Okay, so your motion is to change the dates wherever it says June 1st to July 28th?
Yes.
That's your motion? Okay,
Yes.
second on that?
Second.
Okay. Motion made to change the date to July 28th, wherever it says June 1st, properly made by Mr. Salvatore, properly seconded by Councilwoman Powers. Any discussion on Jimmy Mancini? Go ahead.
Thank
on the
you.
motion.
You know, I came from the service garage, just a little disappointed with the not being able to introduce it with Mr. Salvatore, but that's just my take, but it's about working together, so that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that.
Go ahead, Mr.
This
Salvatore.
resolution was introduced quite a while ago, and you did have that opportunity. But for some reason, certain members of council opted not to move forward on it.
What do you mean by that?
He said he'd like to be a co-sponsor of it. He said he was disappointed in it. He did have an opportunity. I did offer.
Didn't offer me not to introduce it. Don't say that. I didn't
Oh,
get
yes,
a
I
chance
did.
to introduce it.
Okay, all right. Motion made, properly seconded. Any more
You
discussion?
discussed it with me.
As when I give you the floor. Okay, thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Salvatore?
Yes.
Powers?
Yes.
Troyer?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Mancini?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Bergio?
Yes.
Okay, the amendment is passed. Council, what's your pleasure?
Motion to place on the next council agenda.
Support.
Okay, motion made to place on the next council agenda, made by Mr. Salvatore, seconded by Mr. Scott. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Mancini,
Yes.
Okay, that we placed, we'll see that on the next council meeting, and that concludes the legislative committee's work for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the items under number 5. We'll move to item number 6, which is the Safety Committee. Chairman Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, as chairman to this committee, I never asked this to be put on the agenda, so I was just curious how it even got there.
Sorry,
I didn't ask for this to be put on the agenda.
no, I asked for it to be put on the agenda because it's been in committee since February 14th, so.
Now we're back in committee on the 6th, on the 13th.
It was on the committee. I was on an agenda on 6/13, and by vote of council placed back in committee. I never authorized it to be put on the agenda as chairman, so therefore I'm not going to entertain any type of motion or allow any discussion on it because I didn't put it there. What I will do is entertain a motion to have it removed because I don't think it was put in there properly.
Support.
You have to make the motion.
You did.
No.
Oh, I was asking for anybody want to make that motion? I'll entertain that motion.
Sorry. Then I guess I'll make the motion to have it removed.
Support.
That motion made and properly supported to have this item removed. That was put on, in my opinion, improperly. Any questions on the motion?
Mr. Chair?
Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Chair? A question on the motion.
On the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
The question on the motion is to remove it from the agenda because it's the opinion is, or the reason or rationale is because it's not properly on the agenda.
That is my opinion.
Ordinances that have been in committee for a certain length of time, the chairman no longer has the control over whether or not that goes on the agenda. Would you agree with that?
That's if it's never been on an agenda. That was on an agenda. And
Once it's, and then would you agree that our council rules state that the council president his responsibility is to set the agenda?
not from somebody else's committee, Mr. Chairman. I disagree with you there.
You say that? You say that, Mr. Chair.
When have you ever taken anything out of anybody else's committee without a discussion with that particular chairman and put something on the agenda? Name one time that you've done it, except for now.
I'm asking you to say what you said, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I am the chairman of this committee, and I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
I understand the power of the majority, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, you're out of order now. This is my committee.
I understand
I'm asking the clerk to call the
impeding
roll.
of legislation. I understand that. So go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, you're going to cut people off?
President?
There's a motion made and properly supported. I'm calling the roll.
You're going to cut people off? Okay.
I'm not cutting you off.
I just wanted to point out that the law director signed off on this.
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Troyer,
No.
Powers.
No.
Motion carried 5-2.
Did you vote? Did you vote?
Oh, Mancini, I'm sorry. I didn't
No.
call you.
Did she call you, Rachel?
He did call me. I was
She
first.
made the motion.
You made the motion.
No.
You voted no? 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Okay, it's 4-3. Motion carried.
Motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, before we adjourn, I have one public service announcement, if you'd indulge me, please.
Point of personal privilege? Sure, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we're going to be having a special Board of Control on July 4th. Reason being is we have the bids for 2 city streets for Sylvia and Middlebrook, so there'll be a special border control. The engineers, one's not out for bid yet, but will be. The other one was completed, so in order to facilitate these roads, there'll be border control on July the 4th at 6:30 here in the council chambers.
You are the rookie, you know.
I made the right choice.
Okay. There's a motion to adjourn by Councilman Mancini. Is there support?
Support.
Clerk, please call the roll on adjournment.
Mancini,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
Troyer,
Yes.
Salvatore. Yes. Bergio.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
This meeting is adjourned at 10:14 p.m. Thank you very much.